Mr. Hayes. Ms. Pat.
Present.
Mr. Roberts.
Here.
Mr. Whalen.
Here.
Ms. Wyman.
Here.
Mayor Satterthwaite.
Here.
Looks like we have quorum. Are there additions or corrections to the agenda? Ms. Wyman?
I noticed that we have a lot of people here for item number 10, discussion of Elm and Vine intersection safety, and I'm wondering if we can move, if it's all right with council members to move that up to right after public input. It's a request I had from some members of the audience. Is that all right with other council
Do
members?
committee members have concerns with that? If not, we'll move in under, did you say under public input?
So just as number, the new number 5, and
New
move the
number
rest
5.
down. Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll move that up. Any other additions or corrections? Okay, if not, I think we have a staff report. Are we going to hear from Mr. Gruey?
Thank you. I wanted to report on a housing partnership. So give me a few minutes. For many, owning a home is the American dream. It is, however, one that requires a great deal of effort and determination in order to achieve. For persons with disabilities, there can often be a number of additional challenges that make the dream seem more impossible. We're fortunate in our community to have an organization whose mission is to assist persons with disabilities in achieving their goals, including home ownership. The Homeownership Coalition for People with Disabilities was formed by the statewide Independent Living Council of Illinois as a means to help people achieve greater levels of independence through home ownership. The coalition has recently expanded to the Centers for Independent Living in Chicago, Decatur, and right here in Urbana. Our own PACE Center for Independent Living has begun to provide services to prospective home buyers, which include outreach, evaluation and referral, credit and budget counseling, home buyer education and support throughout and after the home buying process. In order to provide these services, PACE is partnering with a number of local organizations that share the vision of fair and affordable housing for all. The City of Urbana is proud to be one of those partners. One of the ways that the city serves the members of this community is by continuing to identify and develop homebuyer resources. Here this evening, to recognize this partnership, are Carrie Dunn, President of PACE's Board of Directors, and Robin Arbiter, the Director of Programs for PACE.
Is this close enough?
No, it's not. Can't hear you.
Okay. Is that better?
It's better.
Mr. Whelan?
Should be on. Yeah.
Okay.
Speak into it, though.
Okay. I am Robin Arbiter. I am the Director of Programs at PACE, and with me tonight is Carrie Lee Dunn, our President of the PACE Board. PACE is a non-residential Center for Independent Living that works with individuals and systems to create full inclusion of people with disabilities into all aspects of life, from education to employment, from recreation to voter registration and beyond. We believe that the power of people with disabilities is such that we are the best spokespeople for our needs, wishes, and paths through life. As Bob acknowledged, it is hard as a person with a disability to feel the power of your, well, he was talking about housing abilities, to feel the power of our vote sometimes when we are shut out of parts of the American dream, when even our housing is precarious, and we see ourselves and others like us struggling to get out of local institutions, struggling to find affordable housing, struggling to find affordable housing that is accessible, because without accessibility, even affordable housing does not necessarily constitute a home. Because housing is an issue that disproportionately affects poor people, among whom people with disabilities are overrepresented, housing education and advocacy have been a big part of PACE's work during the 20 years of our existence, and they have grown in importance during the years. The City of Urbana has been a partner in the vision so important to PACE consumers, staff, and volunteers. And I'd like to acknowledge that Urbana was one of the earliest cities in the nation to adopt a visitability ordinance, acknowledging the basic expectation that people with disabilities should have the ability to visit their friends and come inside for a meal and maybe even make use of the bathroom. All very radical in its time. The City of Urbana has been a partner in the vision that people with disabilities have a need for information and referral specific to their circumstances. and that people with disabilities can benefit from the presence of a person in the community who can assist people with disabilities and their families in locating, modifying, and designing houses around their needs. The City of Urbana has been a partner in staffing a position that allows PACE to share technical information, not just with people with disabilities, but with builders, architects, churches, and others who want to include people with disabilities in their plans. And I was reminded seeing Lynn, seeing Lynn in the audience, sorry, that, the hospitals also have participated in this. The city hasn't participated solely out of the kindness of your hearts. Accessibility is good for communities. Accessible, affordable housing programs mean more good neighbors, fewer expensive institutional stays, more families staying together, more children growing up in better conditions. Not only that, but accessibility is good business. Decent, accessible, and affordable apartments get rented. Deaf people pay attention to businesses that have TTYs, and people using wheelchairs and scooters like spending their monies in neighborhoods and stores they can easily access. So tonight, we're here to present you with a certificate that acknowledges your latest partnership with PACE. The City of Urbana was one of the first entities to join us in creating the PACE Homeownership Coalition for People with Disabilities. Not only did the city support the presence of a housing specialist at PACE, but city staff have waded in and are in the thick of things with 14 other organizations' representatives, seeing that people with disabilities are included in the homeownership process. It is not yet an easy process, but people with disabilities can become homeowners, can become part of this very American dream called having your own home. And as some of you may know, homeowners are differently vested in their neighborhoods, in their local businesses, their cities, their elections, and they add to tax revenues. All very good for our community. And many people with disabilities do want into this dream. Across the nation, only 7% have found their way in. So thanks to the City of Urbana, the Homeownership Coalition has been able to take calls from more than 40 people wanting to know about how they can pursue owning a home. Some just need information and referral. More than 20 have come to PACE to meet with the housing specialist, Larry Perlman, for more in-depth work. Several households are approaching readiness to become home buyers, and of course, just last week, a family working with both PACE and the City of Urbana, as well as with a realtor who is part of the Champaign County Association of Realtors, also a partner, bought a home. So that's a big step. So I want to say thanks to Mayor Satterthwaite, council members Esther Patt, Ruth Wyman, James Hayes, Danielle Chenoweth, Joe Whelan, Dennis Roberts, and Christopher Alex. Also want to thank former council members Laura Huth and Milt Otto. And I wanted to acknowledge Libby Tyler, who Libby is the city planner and community development director, Bob Brewy, grants manager, Randy Burgett, housing rehab coordinator, and of course thanks to Aaron Bullock, who is the home coordinator who represents the city so very well on the Homeownership Coalition. This certificate represents the commitments we share to seeing that homeownership is not a privilege of the few, but an opportunity for all. And Carrie would like to read the certificate, and she will give it to you, Mayor Satterthwaite.
Well, I just want, this is PACE Incorporated, recognizes the City of Urbana as a partner in PACE Homeownership Coalition for People with Disabilities. Our mission to identify eligible candidates and assist all people, regardless of their disabilities, in purchasing their own homes, promoting inclusion in community with the highest level of independence desired by people with disabilities.
Well, we're real happy to get this certificate from PACE, and really want to thank you. You've done an outstanding job over the years in researching what's being done in other communities and bringing some of that here to Urbana. And of course, we've been very willing to help you with these new programs. And your dedication and perseverance has really paid off in the long run. And so congratulations to all of you that have worked so hard over at PACE.
Are there additions to the staff report, or is that all, Mayor? Bruce? No? Okay. Next, we have approval of minutes of the previous meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move approval?
I second that approval.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That carries. Next, we have public input, and for those who are in the audience, these little orange slips that are on the back table, if you could just fill it out, and you can check the box to address the committee at this point, which is at the beginning of the meeting, at the time of the agenda item, or you can also choose to register your support or opposition, and you don't have to speak. So you just fill that out in the back, and if you could bring it up to me or the clerk, then I will call you to speak or register your support or opposition. First, we have Robert Michael Doyle on Domestic Partner Registry. Oh, I'm sorry. I just explained that, didn't I? I'm trying to do two things at once here. It doesn't work. So we'll wait for you till the time of the Domestic Partner Registry. Next, we'll hear from Stephen Kaufman on the TIF program.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak before you this evening. My name is Stephen Kaufman. I'm a resident of Fort Burnett Circle in Urbana. I've been a resident of Urbana for the past 30 years. I really applaud a lot of hard work that I know that the mayor and the council have done to bring business and increase the tax base in the city of Urbana. I guess it's a never-ending uphill climb, but you have been working steadfastly in that, and I really applaud your efforts in that, and most recently the hopeful turnaround that will take place at Lincoln Square. One of the tools that you've been using is this tax incentive program, or ways to entice businesses to expand or to come to the area. And I've been reading a bit about that in the papers recently, and that's raised some questions. The main question is there some accounting of this to show that it's actually working and increasing the balance to the city and the citizens for the monies that are being expended to the monies that are coming in? And I know that I would appreciate knowing the answer to that, and probably if it could be made in a more, that information be made in a more public way, I believe that citizens of Urbana in general would like to know whether the millions of dollars that you've been investing for us to increase the tax base really have brought back more than that investment, okay? And so I'd like to request of you some accounting of that, and I hope that we can get that accounting relatively soon, in fact, before you hand out more money, okay, which may be imminent. Some of the reasons that I raised this are things that I've read in the newspaper, and as we all know, they may not be complete reports or totally unbiased opinions. So, but they're there, and that's what I'm confronted with as a citizen of the town, such as the investment in Stone Creek. I read in a letter led to a major shortcoming from the investment back to what the city obtained. A few weeks ago, I read in the paper again, whereby you've awarded $250,000 to, I think it's called One Plaza in downtown, the big white building.
County Plaza.
Okay, which is a building that's already there, and to upgrade their utilities and services in that, and sort of as a compensation for them losing a tenant that's going to go into Lincoln Square. Whether that's an accurate description of why the money was given or not, I don't know, okay? But are we really in the business to be giving out monies for established businesses to upgrade their heating and air conditioning and other systems in buildings at the taxpayer's expense? Maybe you had other reasons to be giving out those monies. Maybe you felt badly that that big tenant was moving from that building to another building, but that's business as far as I'm concerned. Okay? And I understand now that you're again considering making a major concession of taxpayers' dollars to the development of another area, which right in front of me says Gateway Shoppers, I guess, at 5 Points. I welcome them coming in. I welcome all investment coming in. I'm still very confused as to why we need to bribe people, give them financial incentives to come and establish businesses. I could see if a business is going to cost $10 million and the city's going to put in $1 million, or that they should own 10% of the building or the business. Okay? That's a different way to look at giving incentives. But basically, I think time is due for the citizens to get an accounting of whether or not this program is actually working to the financial interests of the city, and I hope we can get that before further monies are dispersed. Thank you very much.
Any questions committee members have? Mr. Whalen.
Steve, you know the difference between retention of businesses, existing businesses, and trying to bring in new prospects?
I understand all those words, yes.
So you know that the Champaign County Development Corporation had worked extensively for years, long time, I don't know how long, maybe 15 years, and frequently has brought in businesses to Champaign and not Urbana. You know that too. Do you think it's easier for new businesses to come into town or retain existing businesses?
I have no idea.
No idea.
Absolutely none. You people who have been making the effort must.
Well, I'm just wondering, you suppose it would be good for you to contact the mayor and sort of try to get an overview of what you're talking about and what you're questioning?
Well, you folks have the information. I think it's a straightforward question. Is the program working to the financial interests of the city, whether it's retention or bringing in new businesses? What one could, I'm actually concerned about whether you've opened up a Pandora's box, whether the business next door now wants a new heating and air conditioning system, or else buy. Okay? And is that the best use of these funds? Is it consistent with your goals? And more to the point, is it working? Okay.
Do you understand, and let me ask you further, Steve, do you understand the competitiveness between like cities like Champaign or any other nearby cities that might want to compete with Urbana by lowering those businesses away from Urbana?
I believe that in a capitalist society, the economics should be worked out in that arena, okay? Yeah. And I question whether or not it is the city should be buying new air conditioning for a business that's threatening to leave. And in fact, why all of a sudden, because it's losing a major tenant, the city is now anting in to that, okay?
Well, I'm asking these questions because they're all pertinent to the flight of business from the city and the desire to retain them And I'm wondering what's the best way for you to get the answers to your questions, because the questions you're raising are very good ones that we all wonder about, I'm sure, to one degree or another. But I'm sure that if you contact the mayor, you could probably nail down some of the answers to your questions.
Well, I view this as contacting the mayor. Please consider yourself contacted. If you don't know the answers to whether something is working, I would say let's get the answers before you give out more money,
Mayor.
because it's the taxpayers' money.
This is generally supposed to be where we get the input from you and your concerns, but when this agenda item comes up, we've got a cash flow to describe how much comes in and how much is going out in the incentive, and we don't have with us tonight for all the other projects that we've been talking about, but we can, if you'd like to give me a call, I can go over those with you and show you exactly, how the money comes in, what percentage of it goes back to a developer for any particular project. But we do cash flows on every single project that is passed through the city council. We've got one for tonight, so when that comes up, we'll try to explain that so that everybody understands it.
Thank you. And I think it's not just my individual ignorance on this. I think there's a general question that to inform the citizens of Urbana whose money you're actually spending on their behalf, that it's actually working to do what you believe it's set out to do. And from your comments, the answer is we really don't know.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, we have so many people who are sitting and waiting to
I
speak.
just want to answer that because that was leveled at my questions.
Mr. Whalen, I think what Mr. Kaufman is asking for is a cost-benefit analysis
Know what he's asking for.
of the economic development projects that we've undertaken, at least in recent history. And the mayor has responded by saying that that's available. So at this point, I think that what the best thing to do is to make that available. And what Mr. Kaufman is saying is that he doesn't want that just available to him, but to available to the public as a whole. So I think at this point, we know what we can do with this concern, and we can move on to the next public input item. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Wyman.
Just one point, if the mayor's going to provide that to Mr. Kaufman, obviously if we could get that in our council packets, or if Mr. Weldon has it, I would think, if maybe for the last perhaps 10 years, if there's a listing, if those have been done, that would be great. Thank you.
That's a lot.
Well, if you've got for the last few years, that would be a good start. We've got it now for the gateway shops, you said, but this is question, obviously Mr. Kaufman's not the first one who's asked, I'm sure, council members about this, and if we've got that or some summary of it, that might be helpful, and well, I know it'll be helpful in answering questions from constituents.
Well, it would be helpful for us to have a more specific direction to come back and with, something that would be meaningful to you. Obviously, in aggregate, we've got the TIF districts, and each TIF district has a report that we do annually, and so we can show you, how much money comes in, how much money goes out, and to what specific projects. Or if you want to identify a certain number of projects, and we can do a project-by-project analysis of somebody. 10 years, we've probably done 30 or 40 projects, and so that's not going to be easy to put all that together on a case-by-case basis. So if you could be a little more specific about exactly what you want, and then we can try to put that together and make it available to the public.
Sure. Well, I'll talk with other council members and Mr. Kaufman and get a memo to you. Thank you.
Ms. Pat?
What was just suggest? I think a lot of people ask about Stone Creek, and we know what the money in was $3.5 million, and to just show the tax revenue. Although I will say that if you just show the city tax revenue, it's going to come out negative, so you might also want to show the tax revenue to the other taxing districts, to the park district, the school district, et cetera.
Okay, do we have a resolution on this concern then? Okay. Next, we have Ricky Baldwin on the Domestic Partner Registry.
Hi, thanks. My name is Ricky Baldwin, and I live on California Street here in Urbana. And I've been married for several years, and I have two wonderful children. I mention that because I have been privileged to have access to health insurance for my family through my job, through my wife's job. I've also been able to use family medical leave. And if I needed it, hopefully I won't need it soon, but if I did need it, I would have access to bereavement rights. But I think what I want to say here is that what is a right in principle isn't a right in fact if only some people have access to it. And an awful lot of people are being denied access to some of those rights. This domestic partner registry is not going to fix all of those problems, but it's a step in that direction. I think we have an obligation as a democratic society to abide by certain principles. Equality is a very basic one. And I know that some people may say they have religious objections. Some of those objections may have been raised to defend slavery or to object to women's suffrage at one time or another, things that we don't agree with anymore and pretty universally recognized as wrong positions now. Other religions also have a difference of opinion on this issue. Anyway, it's not the government's business, I think, to get involved in those religious differences. I think it is the government's business to make sure that all people have access to, or equal access to the rights and privileges of our society as much as possible. This domestic partner registry would be a small step in that direction, and I hope the council will agree and we'll start this registry as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any questions for Mr. Baldwin? Not? Thank you for your
Thank
time. Next, we have Tiger Swan of 508 West Elm Street on a domestic partner registry, and he does not choose to address the committee, but asks that his position be entered into the record as in support of the domestic partner registry. Next, we have Scott Dossett at 501 East Main on the dangerous Elm and Vine intersection.
Did I say Main? It's supposed to be high. Hi, Scott Dossett. I live at 501 East High Street.
Oh, hi. No, I just made up Main. Excuse me.
That's
High
okay.
Street.
That's okay, Danielle.
It says hi.
As long as you don't make up
It is
anything
Main.
else, okay? Good afternoon. It's nice to see a full house at City Council. It's been a while, and all the seats are full. So thank you very much for coming together again to take our complaints and hopefully the few accolades that the citizens of Urbana care to pass your way. About 3 weeks ago, I made my first inquiry into what I consider to be an unsafe traffic and pedestrian situation at the northwest corner of Vine and Elm Street here in downtown Urbana, in which a massive brick wall has been inserted right in the line of sight to people that are trying to cross the intersection. I'll remind you that several of the sort of trunk bus lines that run through Urbana navigate down Elm Street to take a right to pick up people in front of the old county courthouse. The problem is that I take it the County of Champaign has put an inappropriate, too large, and hopefully soon to be removed structure at the northwest corner of that intersection. And I just drove past it again on my way to council, and this big low wall that kind of reminds me of the Welcome to the U of I type walls around town was pretty much effectively blocking my view of the intersection of Main and Vine and that whole area between Main and Elm Street South from about the time I got my bumper 10 feet from the stop sign until I actually had my bumper about 3 feet past the new stop line that Public Works has established. I don't know how much you guys have read about this. Again, I started 3 weeks ago with a query to the Traffic Commission in the city of Urbana and was roundly ignored, which actually I usually at least get a response, we'll talk to you later, but neither Chief Adair or the other sitting member of that commission even bothered to respond to an email from a citizen, which I consider to be a personal affront, but more importantly, we have a community safety issue that we're talking about here. If you want Urbana to be a walking town, if you want to talk about greenways and bike paths, and if you want to talk about people using Crane Alley and the structures that you're trying to build into your downtown plan to enhance commerce, you must give them safe ingress and egress from the places they're trying to get to. Please do something about the obstruction at the northwest corner of Elm and Vine Streets before somebody gets hurt there. And the way people come through Maine, kind of launching themselves up past Schnucks into downtown Urbana, someone is going to get hurt. So, thank you very much.
Any questions? If not, thank you for your input. Next we'll have Teresa Lenhart of 803 South Walnut Street on Domestic Partner Registry, and she does not choose to address the committee, but asks that her position be entered into the record as in support of a Domestic Partner Registry. And the last person I have a card for is Samuel Furr of St. Joseph on the issue of Elm and Vine intersection in the courthouse parking lot wall, and he wishes to present at the time of. So we are going to next hear a discussion about the Elm and Vine Street intersection safety, at which point I will have Mr. Furr come back and he can speak to that. So is there any other public input this evening? Okay, if not, we are going to move forward to the discussion of Elm and Vine intersection safety. Do we have a person who's presenting on this?
I think Dennis is going to.
Okay. Mr. Roberts, you can go ahead and start.
Well, this is really the third week that the discussion has come up about the safety of this intersection. Originally, discussion started when a person in the neighborhood contacted me saying they knew of an individual that had an accident at that intersection, and was very upset and cited the fact that this low wall that's been erected at the courthouse parking lot corner at Elm and Vine had obstructed the sight of the oncoming SUV, and the pickup truck that he was driving was hit. He and his passenger were shaken. The insurance company ultimately totaled his car or his truck, and that this was something that shouldn't exist in an area that had just recently been cleared of other buildings that had obstructed the site for years at that location, basically the old Elite Diner garage extension or whatever you would call it. And so it would be ironic for the city or the county to erect a structure that would basically reinstall the obstruction of site. So with that, we have had some discussion from staff and other individuals, and I have also received some email further indicating people's concern, and I'd like to read one from William McGrath, and he lives at 707 South Rice Street, to the Urbana City Council. I'm writing in regards to the traffic intersection of Elm and Vine in downtown Urbana. I have driven on that intersection for over 30 years. I distinctly recall that a wall was built recently on the northwest corner of the intersection. Immediately upon my first use of that intersection after the construction of the wall, I noticed a significant diminution of the visibility of oncoming traffic from the north on Vine Street. I believe that this new wall has created a substantial traffic hazard, and I would recommend either the removal of the wall or an installation of a four-way stop at the intersection. Otherwise, I fear that a major increase in traffic accidents due to the lack of reasonable vision looking north onto Vine Street may happen. So this is one of several emails that I have received some of them of which I've included in the memo that I had passed out to you, and I won't read every single one of them. I will maybe just state that Michael Lehman, who lives on Green Street, said that any accidents at Vine and Elm are likely to be at a relatively high speed and quite possibly will result in a serious injury or even death. One can make various claims about who is legally responsible in this case, but morally the failure of the city to realize the inappropriate specific application of a general rule, and he's referring to the sight lines that were cited by the city staff as being adequate for vision to the north of that intersection, is going to lead to a calamity sooner or later. So I had asked Chief Adair to comment upon it, being a member of the city police who might have some kind of insight. He did fax me a copy of the traffic report, and in the report it does say that specifically that this low brick wall was cited by the occupant of the truck to be a cause in not being able to proceed safely into Vine Street. So I do have thoughts about how this might proceed, and I would like to know if there's comments from the staff or the city at this time to augment the discussion before we make a motion.
Okay, are there comments specifically from city staff at this point? Mr. Gray?
At our last meeting, there was 3 items of information that council wanted to have, and one was a sketch of the intersection. We provided that in your packets just to get a feel with an aerial view of how the geometry of the intersection is. So I wanted to at least provide that to you and show you where the wall is in relationship to the streets and the stop bars and the visibility of how one would approach that intersection. Secondly, I included from our code of ordinances how these dimensions are obtained, and again, this section 20-86 has been our visibility triangle for the last 30 years is what we use throughout the community. There was also a request to talk to the county administration as to when the completion of the sign would be, and the lettering and the lighting is what remains, and he felt that work would be completed this spring, is what he said as far as the signage completion. There might have been a question, I thought there was a question maybe about a CD issued sign permit, and I followed up, yes, there was one issued. CD did receive a request from the county for both locations, and a permit was issued for that. And lastly, a question was raised as to just what is our practice, what is our policy for marked pedestrian crosswalks, and in a one-page memo I enumerated pretty much how we determine where those locations are throughout the community. And there's various judgments used in those determinations. One thing I noticed in number 4 that I didn't augment after I read it the second time, realized where we talked about marked crosswalks are considered at all intersections with high numbers of pedestrians. Generally our guide is 50 peds per hour or 200 or more per day. That's what we consider to be a high pedestrian crossing. So I didn't include that. That might have been some useful information for some folks. Here to answer any questions. I also have Mr. Joe Smith with us. He's our senior civil engineer. He's our in-house traffic expert. So if there are some technical questions this evening, if I can't answer them, I think he probably can. So.
Well, actually, I have one. On the diagram showing the visibility triangle that is described, that you just described. This is an aerial photograph that was taken before construction changed this intersection some. And I see that at this corner there had been a designated pedestrian crossing to the outside of the stop mark when the Elite Diner was in that location. And I'm wondering why, if it was important to have this intersection marked with a pedestrian crossing at one time, it would be less advisable at this moment.
I think it was a judgment call with respect to where should vehicles stop to see clearly the southbound traffic. So the decision we made on early November to change that was to put that stop bar in a location where a driver could stop and clearly see beyond the wall. It doesn't preclude a pedestrian from crossing the intersection.
Yes, it seems like we're favoring an individual who's in a motor vehicle which weighs about 2,000 pounds heavier than an individual who's crossing by foot, safe access to this intersection. And I'm just wondering if that's a useful call, considering on weekends the amount of people who come by foot from the East Urbana neighborhood into this district to use the farmer market in the summertime, and whatever individuals who are walking to and from the bus or to shops in the downtown area. And also we know that in the future, when the Lincoln Square Village project is completed, there will be, I don't know, like 500 more employees coming and going into the, into the downtown area right adjacent to this corner. And people who are going to be residents in apartments above the Lincoln Square, who will obviously be using foot mobility to enter the downtown area from such a close location. They're not going to take a car out of their parking lot and then park it a block away in front of Main Street. So I feel like it's a questionable decision, and while it does perhaps satisfy some kind of a sighting clearance to see north on Vine, it's at the detriment of pedestrian traffic. Every other intersection in the downtown area has a pedestrian walk path inscribed on it. Certainly, every single one that's adjacent to Lincoln Square Mall has a walk path at it. So I don't know. I'm feeling that is that there's still a question. Would be interested in hearing other council members.
Ms. Wyman.
I just had a question. The visibility triangle that you provided us with, this is a minimum rather than a maximum or any sort of set requirement. Is that right?
Correct.
So if one wanted to create a better or a larger visibility triangle by moving this concrete wall, there wouldn't be any violation of local ordinances by creating more sight or more of a visibility than currently exists.
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions? Mr. Alex.
No, not a question, but I guess a response to
Go ahead.
the Alderman's comment. It seems to me like kind of everyone's in agreement here. This is a case where the law conflicts with reason. I mean, I think anyone who's driven past there recognizes that this sign is an obstruction to visibility. I think anyone who's looked at this intersection realizes that it would make sense to have a crosswalk at this intersection, given we have them everywhere else in downtown, and that probably the aesthetic benefits or informational benefits afforded by this sign are outweighed by safety issues and the disadvantages, as opposed to, for example, if this were a building or some other structure, we might be able to argue there's a considerable benefit to having this thing there. And I think that's part of the reason that people are frustrated by this. All that being said, I think the Director of Public Works, and I appreciate this, provided us with a sketch that shows to a pretty high standard that the sign is in fact legal. The visibility triangle, which determines how close to the street this obstruction can be, is based on the width of the street and is based on the speed limit on the street. I noticed that the visibility triangle for a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit is 280 feet, the actual visibility triangle afforded by the sign is 311, which is in excess of that. Yet if I notice at 35 miles per hour, based on the ordinance information provided by city staff, at 35 miles an hour, it would be 340 feet, which would be in excess of what's currently available. And at 40 miles an hour, it would be 400 feet, which is considerably in excess of what's available. And I think perhaps part of the reason that we perceive this as being insufficient as we drive by here is that I think, in fact, probably the average vehicle southbound on Vine Street is moving considerably faster than 30 miles an hour. And in fact, it's not unusual to see traffic moving 40 miles an hour. I don't think this is the fault of the city or the police department or anything else, but just a recognition of the fact that this is a major arterial street. It's a 4-lane street, and that traffic is going to tend to move faster regardless of what the posted speed limit is. So I look at this as a case where the sign appears to be legal. We've not heard any indication that the sign is in fact illegal, and we have considerable evidence from the city to show that it is legal. However, I think probably nobody on the council thinks that it's a positive benefit to have this sign here obstructing people's vision, and perhaps something we consider would be, given that we may have no legal basis on which to require that the property owner, in this case the county, move the sign, at the very least I would hope we could offer a resolution to communicate to the County of Champaign's Facilities Committee our concerns and the concerns of the citizens, and ask that they look into this with the possibility of altering this in the interests of public convenience and public safety.
Thank you. Was it questions? Before we have a motion, we do have a member of the public who wanted to speak, and I kind of wanted for there to be some presentation and then that member of the public to speak, and then we could entertain motions. So if the committee is okay with that, I'd like to bring Samuel Furr up to speak and address the committee. And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. Okay. Go ahead.
I am that person who came to the corner at Elm and Vine, as I have many times, and I'm familiar with that corner. I came up, I was with my young son. We were in my Dodge Dakota, which is not a short or small vehicle. Came up to the corner there and stopped at the stop sign, and looked, did not see anybody coming, proceeded to turn left onto Vine Street. It was at that point that a lady driving a GMC Jimmy met the side of my truck and thereby totaled my truck, which was kind of a sad thing. But my new truck will have side airbags, though. The situation with this is that I really did not see this lady coming in a decent-sized vehicle because of this sign. I was kind of curious about it, and so then I started doing a little more research on this this whole thing. I was glad that this woman was not injured. We were not injured. Both vehicles sustained damage and everything, and I'm sure that I'll be paying for that for quite a while. But when I looked at this sign, it is really, everybody's mentioned that it's a short sign, but that sign is actually about 5.5 feet from the ground to the top of the sign. And that's not counting the distance from the street up to the level that the ground is at the sign. So it's about 6 feet. I was over there wandering around the parking lot measuring things and standing in the street and things like that this evening. And I measured a car that was parked there. And it was somebody's Dodge Stratus. And 5.5 feet is taller than that car. 5.5 feet, that's not counting the distance from the street to the to the bottom of the sign even, which would be more like 6 feet. That is higher than the top of my truck, much less where I would be looking out. So I really believe that this sign was a major obstruction there. The stop line has been moved forward. It's about 13 feet forward of where it used to be. And that's quite a distance. The crosswalk, as has been mentioned, has been blacked out. So if you pull up to the stop line, there is no way, unless, well, of course, if you have a real short car, I suppose that you could pull up to the stop line and people could still walk behind your car. But you're substantially ahead of the stop sign if you stop at the line. And I see that recently the Public Works people have added a sign below the stop sign that says "Stop at Line," and that helps because this sign, the stop line, is so far ahead of the stop sign that it really is not evident when you pull up there, especially if you're familiar with the intersection, and you pull up to the stop sign, you stop, you look, and you proceed. I didn't realize that it was such an obstructed view. But it is, in my opinion, a really dangerous intersection. I have mentioned this to some other people, just in passing, and I mentioned this to one of my students at Urbana High School, and she said, yes. She said, my folks and I were just at that corner, and we mentioned that somebody's going to get hit there. And I mentioned this to another person. She said the same thing, and I know that this has been a conversation about, whether people have, daisies growing on their corner and it's obstructing the view. And here we have this, the county is building this sign, which looks quite nice, but it's, I believe, a major obstruction to the view. It's impeding the crosswalk there. It's something that remains dangerous, even though the line has been moved forward and everything. I stopped at that line and looked, and if you stopped with your vehicle behind the stop line, which is what the Urbana Police Department told me when I inquired, that you are to stop behind the line, you still are not in a clear view of Vine Street, especially because there is that little rise in Vine where people are coming up from the north there, the direction of where the Corkscrew and Schnucks is, has been mentioned. So you really have to have your wheels on the stop line, which is, according to UPD, ahead of where you should be, and you might lose your bumper from a car going down Vine Street by the time you're that far out, but to really have a clear view, that's what it takes. So I would really encourage you to, do what could be done to eliminate this obstruction, and, take a very safe look at that yourself, but be careful at the corner of Elm and Vine in the meanwhile.
Okay. Did you have particular questions?
Yes, I think Mr. Whalen was first.
Mr. Whalen, go ahead. Did you have questions?
No, not of you. I just want to ask Mr. Gray, if I may.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Gray, what would it cost to put a stoplight in there? And would it be advisable with the, the short, one block distance from Maine?
A traffic signal installation would probably be in the $100,000 to $150,000 cost.
$150,000. Somewhat prohibitive.
Depends on what kind of geometric changes we'd have to do with the pavement and such. You'd have to study that, but it gives you an order of magnitude of what the cost would be.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, could we hear from Ms. Pat, who had her hand up before public input, and then the mayor?
Just two quick questions, if you would clarify. Had the stop line already been moved forward at the time of your accident?
The stop line had been moved forward at the time of my accident. I inquired about that to Mr. Gray, and he told me that it had. I did not see the stop line up there. I stopped at the stop sign, I stopped where the line used to be, where I was accustomed to it being.
Well, I pulled up the new stop line, and it's still, I think there's a problem. And that leads to my other question. The vehicle that hit you,
Right.
was it in the southbound, was it in the right lane or the left lane? Do you know?
When I saw it coming at me, I wasn't paying attention to
Okay.
which lane it was in. I can tell you that it hit all four parts of my the side of my truck, which pretty well totaled it out. So
I'm sorry, there was vehicular damage. I'm glad that there was no personal injury.
so am I.
Thank you.
And I appreciate everyone's time on looking
Mayor?
at this.
Well, just thinking of how to try to proceed with this, and since it does seem like the sign was put there within our ordinances, we can certainly approach the county and find out if they're willing to remove it, or, my understanding is that we would be able to have some of our public works people go and remove it for them if we were given permission. So is it the desire of the council that we start discussions with the county to see what we can do with this sign, and then we can report back to you? Obviously, if they don't want to have it removed, there are some other things that we can do there to make that intersection safer. I think, we can restrict movements there so that it would be, for instance, a right turn only. So we wouldn't allow, traffic going across Vine Street or making left-hand turns because those are much more dangerous movements than right-hand. But it seems like, the best solution would be if by agreement, the county would either remove it or allow us to remove it. And have some, they might have some alternative kind of designation for the courthouse complex, or they may decide that, other signage is already sufficient. So is it the desire of the council that we speak to the county and find out?
Let's hear from Mr. Alex and then Ms. Pat.
Madam Chair, I just had a question for the speaker. Have you been in contact with anybody from the county? Have you gone to the county board or the county board facilities committee or anything and made this case to them?
No, I have not.
Okay, because I think it's a good case, and any feedback that you receive from them might be useful to us in determining what direction to take as a council. Because I think, to the extent that we can direct the Public Works Department to do what they can to improve safety, I think it strikes me that the Public Works Department has probably already done everything within their power, short of designating this a one-way street or putting in a traffic signal at great cost, as we said. I think we all agree this is probably an unfortunate situation that the Public Works has had to make these efforts, but we may be to the point where our only remedy now is to, as the mayor suggested, go to the people that own the sign and say, hey, we think there's a problem here. Maybe you ought to think about removing your sign. I was curious to know if you'd done that, and if you hadn't, maybe that would be a good next stop.
Okay.
Ms. Pat.
I think that we, pretty much I agree. I think we should go to the county, but I think we should ask the county board members. I think the city council should pass a motion requesting that the county board members direct that the wall be taken down.
Is that a motion?
Well, Mr. Roberts had a motion, and I want to thank Mr. Roberts for bringing this issue up and for being persistent, so I don't want to, he's been polite, and people have sort of been, we've gone from question to debate to question, so if he wants to make a motion, I think his motion would be similar, and I'd be happy to yield to him.
Okay, Mr. Roberts, do you have a motion?
Well, I do, and first I would like to thank Samuel for coming in and commenting on it. And I was going to ask him if, it's not clear in the traffic report that was in the police department. It occurs to me that as well as the traffic on Elm Street having a site obstruction to the north, it's very possible that any car parked on Elm trying to pull out might well be obstructed to anybody who's driving down Vine Street. If the sign, as you mentioned, is 5.5 feet high or more, and could well camouflage most of a car except for perhaps the front tires. So I'm thinking that there's even a further consideration about safety as far as the traffic, on the speed of the traffic coming down. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I think that council has come to some kind of a osmotic conclusion here that there is a problem with this intersection at this time still. And so I would like to move that council contact the county, whether it be the county board or what other appropriate body, to request the removal of the sign on the grounds of public safety and concern that the city of Urbana has.
Second. We have a motion and a second, and if I just can clarify what the motion is, it is that the this committee is directing staff to contact the county board and administration to request that the sign be removed for the sake of public safety.
Yes.
Is that correct?
I would
Okay.
say.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Wyman and then Mr. Alex.
Well, one concern is that, as Mr. Gray suggested or commented, that, as I understand it, the county has already requested and community development already issued a permit for the county to put up a sign in the concrete wall. And if I understand that correctly, it's to start putting the lettering in that wall. Obviously, we want action taken on this before there's more money invested into the actual concrete wall. And so there's an urgency as far as safety goes, and also as well as public monies that are being expended. And so request that this take one of the top priorities as far as talking with county board members and with the administration, and then ask for a report back before or by council next Monday. So if there's further action that's necessary, we'll be able to take action either at that meeting or plan to take action at the following committee meeting. Thank you.
So there's a request for that to be included in staff report next week.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Alex?
I think if we are to communicate this to the county, in the interest of consistency with our own ordinances, we should stress that we are not making the request out of any belief that the sign is in violation of our ordinances or that the permit for the sign was improperly issued, but that we're doing it in response to citizen concerns and the perception that for whatever reasons, perhaps reasons not fully understood, motorists who use this intersection view this sign as an obstruction. In other words, that this is not a matter of us believing the ordinance is insufficient or us believing that the permit was issued incorrectly, but that, for whatever reason, at this particular intersection, based on people either not being used to the sign being there or some characteristic of the height or the shape or something of the sign, which perhaps we don't fully understand, we are receiving concerns and there has been an accident. In other words, to make it clear that this is a request that the council or that the county do this out of concern for a public perception of a safety hazard rather than a violation of any particular ordinance.
Okay, Ms. Pat?
I would rather not say there's a public perception, and this is why I wanted to send the ordinance to the city, to county board, or the motion that we passed to county board members. It is an obstruction. I can't see past it when I'm in my car. It's an obstruction. That's my personal observation. I don't care what the law is. It's just a fact. I can't see. There are a number of other people come up and say they can't see, and I think all of us, or most of us, went out and checked it out too, and the reason that we all support this is we each said, I can't see. I agree with you that it's important to communicate that we're not saying they violated our law, but I think we should be clear on not just that there's a perception to be sensitive to it. This is a problem. It is an obstruction. We've heard from the public. We've observed it ourselves. Invite them to go out and make the observation themselves, and I think that it is, I think that the political will would be there among county board members just as is among council members if they just go out and check it out and say, hey, I can't. And I wasn't even trying to cross. That's why I don't think reconfiguring the intersection or restricting turns just to right turn is the proper approach, because what I was trying to do was the right turn. And even the right turn, I had to pull all the way up to see around that wall, and I still couldn't see all the way around the wall. And you could see one lane but not the other. And I thought, okay, I can see it. And then the car came. Wow, I didn't see that car. And so when someone says, hey, it's not safe, and I go look at it, and I feel the same way, I think that would be the experience of people who just say, putting aside the law, let's just look at public safety and the welfare of people, and really how it happens that the visibility triangle is defined by law allows this thing to be there, I don't know. But my personal observation is that wall shouldn't be there. And I think if county board members went and looked themselves, then they would take the initiative to get rid of the wall, because they don't want to be the cause of people's accidents either.
Further discussion?
I think I agree with that comment, except I think that as a city, we need to be concerned about granting permits for things within our ordinances and then passing resolutions directing the requester of the permit to change something that we'd previously agreed to. I mean, I don't think in general there's a problem with the traffic ordinance. I think, and it's not clear to me what it is, but clearly there's a problem with this particular intersection. And my concern is just that we make it clear that we believe that the problem is something unique to this intersection rather than saying, the city is in the business of issuing permits for things that we consider unsafe.
Okay, further, Mr. Roberts.
Well, I think that it's, sometimes it's true that things look really good on paper, and design can be very attractive, but when these things are built and you find that there's a problem, you don't have to necessarily even go out and measure anything. You just know that there's a problem at the intersection, and it has to do with sight and safety. And I think it behooves the city to do the best it can to safeguard the welfare of its citizens and not to create a safety hazard unknowingly or unwittingly, which I think has happened in this case. I think there was every good intention that this wall would be a wonderful feature to the courthouse and, et cetera. But in fact, it didn't work. And rather than spend further money, setting in the plaque saying I'm the courthouse, or putting some flowers around it and landscaping it, it might be better just to remove it. It's not going to be missed. The courthouse is well marked, both in the front and at the Vine and Main intersection, which is your main intersection, and the people who are coming up Vine from the other direction, they'll figure out where they are when they get there.
Okay, is there further discussion on this motion, Mr. Allen?
I just have one more comment. I don't want to belabor this. I know this is just a sign, but in the interest of avoiding this type of thing in the future, I don't want to try to rewrite the Uniform Manual of Traffic Control Devices on the council floor, but I would think that perhaps in future for signage like this on arterial streets, we might want to look at modifying the ordinance to look at the average speed of traffic or some other metric of the actual speed of traffic as opposed to the speed limit, recognizing that speed limits tend to be more disregarded on these higher speed streets. I'm trying to come to terms with why this has been a problem at this intersection and not in every other intersection in the city which has trees and buildings and signs and fences and so forth. And I think for me that seems to be the issue, is that looking at the manual, looking at the ordinance, that we say that this is a 58-foot wide 30-mile-an-hour street when in point of fact it's probably closer to a 40-mile-an-hour street.
Ms. Wyman?
I agree with Mr. Alex, and think perhaps the best thing is to ask Traffic Commission to review this issue, as Mr. Alex has so succinctly stated. And then perhaps a summary, we get the council members get the notes from the Traffic Commission meetings, but if changes then are made or need to be made, then those can come to council for final approval.
Just a process question to send something to Traffic Commission. Mayor, does it only take a suggestion of council, or would that be an additional motion in this case?
No, just a suggestion.
Okay.
I mean, we can just have them put it on the agenda. We take requests from citizens, about stop signs, intersections, parking, no parking.
Okay.
So we can put it on the agenda for the next Traffic Commission meeting.
Sounds good.
You wanted the letter to go to the county administrators and all county board members?
Yes, that's my understanding. Okay. Yes. Other committee comments? If not, I do want to just add my comment to the Traffic Commission. I think the Traffic Commission specifically, just maybe tweaking the word of what Mr. Alex said, specifically should look at ordinance, the section 20-86, determination of area-controlled intersections, and consider changing what says under Table 1, speed limit of Street X, to perhaps average speed limit. Because I think that in looking at this picture, average speed at this location, looking at this picture, I think that's really what's going on here. More than anything else is that speed limits are different than what people travel. As much as our police department attempts to enforce our speed limits, it's difficult for us to do that. So I think that that's the particular thing, is perhaps an actual ordinance change that uses a different kind of designation when looking at when looking at what a visibility triangle would be. Okay.
Madam Chair,
Any other-
one more comment. I would just add to that perhaps rather than looking at changing the ordinance in that blanket fashion, we might specifically look at, we have specific classifications of streets, collector streets, arterial streets, and so forth. It might be something that we would want to look at in the context of those more main streets, recognizing that a 30-mile-an-hour residential street is perhaps different than a 30-mile-an-hour arterial street.
That's true.
I will now say no more on this subject.
Okay. I have a request committee before me for a member of the public to speak on this issue. Does the committee have concerns about having a member of the public speak at this point?
That's fine.
Okay, if not, Laurel Pressing at 2106 Grange on the Vision Triangle.
Thank you very much. I never heard of a vision triangle until about a week ago, and I was up in the neighborhood on Eads and Lincoln, and a lady said it was very hard to see the traffic coming south on Lincoln if you were coming out of Eads, and I looked, and indeed it was impossible. So I think this is a much broader problem than Elm and Vine, and it was even a problem at Grange Drive and George Huff, where I live. When you come to a complete stop, there can be bushes that you can't see traffic. So I really think you need to look at many intersections, and it's not always just a question of the speed of the traffic. It could be just vision being blocked.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input. At this point, does the committee have any more comments before we take a vote? If not, all those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? That carries. Next, we're going to jump to what is now number 5 or number 6 on your agenda, ordinance number 2005-01-012, an ordinance amending Article 5 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code establishing speed regulations on certain streets at Goodwin Avenue in particular. Mr. Gray.
Speaking of Traffic Commission, we have a few items they've considered here recently. The first one has to do with Goodwin Avenue. The memo pretty much speaks to the issue, but for a reason unbeknownst at this time anyway, Goodwin Avenue was not included with the litany of streets that were converted from 30 mile per hour to 25 in the University District area. Specifically, Council discussed to keep the speed limits the same at Springfield and on Green Street through the University District, but we thought it was wise to bring Goodwin Avenue back for at least consideration or reconsideration at least, in that the North Campus area has a recent completion of one building and one parking deck, and soon to be completed of another building, the NCSA building that is. So there is definitely more pedestrian and traffic volumes on Goodwin in this area. So it's Traffic Commission recommendation to lower the speed limit to 25 in keeping with the intention to try to make University District safer, and in this case by lowering that speed to 25 miles per hour. The second item then is still in the University District just south of the Krannert Center by the new Gregory Place mixed-use building. There is a request for a loading zone to serve businesses in the Gregory Place apartment area. The loading zone would actually be located in what used to be a no parking area, which was needed for the visibility triangle that was there at one time. But the Gregory Place street is now a one-way southbound street, so it's a moot issue for a visibility triangle at that location now. And the point would be to establish a loading zone for business-related use for parking rather than double parking on the street and that sort of thing. So otherwise, they could be converted to metered spaces if so be it. So those are the two items for consideration.
Committee will take questions on both items at this point. Any questions? If not, a motion is in order.
I move approval of both or move to send both ordinances to City Council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That carries. Next, we have Resolution Number 2005-01-002R. This refers to a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an agreement with the State of Illinois for the modernization of the traffic signals at the intersection of I-74 and Cunningham Avenue, Section 25XN, and traffic signal interconnects from Perkins Road to O'Brien Drive. This refers to Cunningham Avenue between Perkins Road and O'Brien Drive. Mr. Gray?
Yes. Just recently, we received plans, specifications, and a desire by IDOT to improve traffic signals at the eastbound and westbound ramps at Interstate 74 and Cunningham. In conjunction with this work, they also want to install a conduit and fiber optic cable to interconnect the signals between O'Brien Drive at the north end, which is where Fallon Fleet is, and then Perkins Road at the south end, where there's a gas station and a motel. There's a slight cost share with the city. They're asking the city participate in. It's $1,550, and this is for our modest amount of where we have responsibility for the work to be done. So it's staff recommendation that we would enter in an agreement with IDOT. We would identify where funding would come from, and it's my understanding this work would be on a letting this spring, and work would occur later this spring and summer time frame. So it's not an intrusive type of project with lanes closed or whatever, but it's just some minor traffic signal work and some conduit directional bore type work. So,
Any questions from committee members? If not, a motion would be in order.
I move to send this to council with a recommendation for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just got one question.
Mr. Hayes?
What's the total amount of the project?
the total cost, is like on page 4 or so. It's estimated at $131,000. 90% is federal share, federal cost, and then state match is $13,638, and then local match is estimated at $1,226 with a not to exceed at $1,550. So it's a $131,000 project.
Hey, the percentages.
Our percent is very low. It's less than 1%.
But I thought usually our cost would be more than that.
It is. The help here is they're using hazard elimination safety money, 90% federal match. I believe it's partly because of the interstate highway being right there as to why it's such a high match, along with the state. And then the signals like O'Brien and Perkins are our signals, so that's why we have a small share.
Okay, Mr. Roberts.
Maybe I wasn't paying attention appropriately, but the traffic signals that are farther down, farther south on Cunningham, the reason why we're involved with those is to coordinate traffic light signaling, or can you explain that a little bit?
Further south of Perkins Road?
Yes.
Like at Kerr and 5 Points, or?
Yeah, what's being achieved there?
Well, this interconnection stops at the south end at Perkins. So there is no direct interconnect at Kerr, if that's your question.
Well, I guess my question is that my understanding was there was going to be a traffic light installation or change at that intersection.
Yeah, the ramps at Interstate 74, the eastbound ramps, on-ramps, and the westbound off and on-ramps.
Yes, I know about those. Okay. All right.
Maybe
it also said the Perkins Road. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, it's involving Perkins Road for what reason?
To interconnect or tie that traffic signal controller with the other.
Oh, that's where the connection is. Okay.
With the other signalized intersections up to O'Brien Drive.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Now I got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Any other discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Next week we have resolution number 2005-01-003R. Is this a repeat of the last one, or is this related? A resolution appropriating funds for the modernization of signals at the intersection of US 45 and I-74 and signal interconnects from Perkin Roads to O'Brien Drive.
I'm sorry, I thought that my motion should have been clarified to include both of those, number 7 and number 8.
Okay, so we have a...
So
you had the motion.
That was meant as an omnibus.
Okay. Could we just, for the sake of the clerk, we're just going to take that motion again in omnibus fashion, so that committee members who are voting know that we're voting on both 2R and 3R?
We just...
Go ahead.
Well, we just moved 3R. I
Yeah.
moved 3R.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Okay, next we'll go to ordinance number 2005-01-014, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a redevelopment agreement with BlackRock Properties, Inc. This refers to 5 Points Northwest, and we'll hear from Dr. Tyler on this.
We're going to do a tag team here. I'll start by going through the memorandum and providing some update. Then Bruce Walden will be going through the agreement and some of the fiscal impacts. Then we have Mr. Joe Petrie and his associates who will have a presentation for the council. This is a redevelopment agreement, again, between the City of Urbana and BlackRock Properties. It's what we're calling actually a pre-development agreement because it will allow the developer to proceed with acquisition of an important property in Urbana. It's the northwest corner of the 5 Points site, and the goal of BlackRock Properties would be to construct a minimum of 50,000 square feet of new retail, service, and office space on the 10-acre site. The developer envisions a combination of hotel, restaurant, shopping center, and outlot retail development on the site. We provided a conceptual site plan in the memorandum, and these have been revised and will be presented this evening in the PowerPoint presentation. Also, pursuant to the development agreement, there will be at a later stage detailed development plans presented to the city, as well as special use permit approval necessary for the shopping center component. Changes occurring since the council packet was submitted included an increase in the scope of the project, so that where previously we were looking at least a $7 million project for property acquisition and development, probably now looking on the order of between 8 and 10 million, so it's a very large undertaking. Also, we're looking at a larger obligation from the city to pursue public improvements in the area. There's extensive access improvements and streetscape desired in this location, as well as utility relocations. So this would be proposed to increase from $100,000 to $150,000. And the cap and the assistance that's mentioned in the agreement in the memorandum would no longer be set at $1 million, since it would serve as a constraint on the size of the development. Other city obligations for this project would be to extend the duration of TIF District Number 2 to the year 2022, and we'll have a presentation later this evening on that plan amendment. We've also obligated ourselves to continue to work with IDOT towards placement of a traffic signal at the intersection of Cunningham Avenue and Crystal Lake Drive, and that will help in the future to improve access for this whole block. Some of the other aspects of background for the project in terms of land disposition, this will be located at the current site of the O'Brien Auto Park, which is scheduled for relocation to the property on O'Brien Drive north of 74. Currently working on that site, and hope to be looking for their relocation late this year or early next year. Also, this project would involve a land swap with the Urbana Park District for a portion of the special events parking, and that would result in a better configuration of the site. So that's another necessary acquisition for the developer to pursue. In the development agreement, you'll see our familiar provisions of TIF assistance for 10 years in an amount not to exceed 80% for the retail space and no more than 50% for any office space, although the expectation would be for largely retail use at this site. In terms of the plan basis for the development agreement and for the development, we really look to the TIF 2 plan, which again we'll talk more about this evening, as well as the downtown strategic plan, and we've included in the packet an illustration from the downtown plan just showing one layout of how this 5 Points corner could be developed. I wanted to go over the bullet points in the memorandum since a lot of the dates have changed, and I want to make sure that you have the right information. First, the first bullet point on page 2, really we're looking at in the agreement, it's just not consistent with the agreement, is that there would need to be the application for special use permit on May 1st, 2006. It would be kind of quick to do it that soon. And the acquisition of the fee simple title to the entire project site would be March 1st, 2005. So that's a change, and that's for the property that's currently occupied by O'Brien. And then in the revised development agreement, we would have Tract B, which is a park district swap, and that would be by March 1st, 2006. So there would be a timeline to achieve those goals. Then completing demolition of existing structures and preparing the site for construction would be by March of 2007, and that's just to allow time for that to be accomplished. Completing construction of Phase 1 of the redevelopment project, we would now define Phase 1 as 15,000 square feet of development, not as any particular hotel, restaurant component. That's not the goal necessarily. We didn't want to tie into that level of specifics. And then the final date would remain. So really, we would be looking at build-out by November 1st, 2009. So it's a very, very extensive project, very exciting, fits within our TIF 2 and Downtown Strategic Plan goals, and it's something that we felt was important to bring to council sooner rather than later in a conceptual form for a pre-development agreement. So I'll ask Mr. Walden now to go through the agreement and the financials.
In the interest of flow, I think it'd probably work out better if Joe would give his presentation, and then I'll conclude with the agreement and the financials.
Okay.
So Mr. Petrie is the developer, and so...
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you this evening. I have a newfound appreciation for the issues that you face and the seriousness with which you face them. So I applaud the way you've, as I've sat here and listened to some of the discussion, I've been very impressed. Just a couple of things before I begin. My name is Joe Petrie. I represent BlackRock Properties, one of the two parties that will be involved in this development if you approve it. I will be partnering with Ivan Richardson, someone you know and the city of Urbana knows quite well, to do this jointly with him, and at the appropriate time we would ask that the names of the entity with which this agreement is entered into change to reflect that. I want to thank the people on the staff who have worked so very hard to do this and come up with, frankly, I've asked a very challenging, a lot of input from staff on a very rapid basis, and I really appreciate the effort that they put forward to offer this opportunity to you to consider. And in particular, Dr. Tyler and Mr. Walden have both been particularly helpful and allowed us to get to the point where we are. I think this is a perfect example of where I think and where I hope Urbana is going in a lot of different ways. This, to me, is an opportunity for win-win. It is, in particular, an opportunity for the city of Urbana to achieve and to begin to work towards many of the goals that you set forth in your comprehensive plan as well as your downtown initiative. Some of those in particular that I see associated with our plan here would be, this is a key intersection at University and Cunningham. And I know it's been looked at very seriously to offer an opportunity to provide an entrance or a gateway to downtown Urbana. And I think we have a unique opportunity to do this. As you know, the site has been occupied for quite some time, and only rarely do we have opportunities to make any significant changes at locations like this. And I think this is one of those opportunities, first of all, to provide a gateway to downtown Urbana. Second, as we'll see in a second, I think there's some very unique linkages between downtown Urbana, this site, which we were going to be calling Gateway Shops if it's approved, and also Crystal Lake Park, which is a very nice green space, of course, which I think is tremendously underappreciated in the city currently. So I think with those, as a gateway feature and the linkages, and probably most important of all, the introduction of what I would expect to be pretty significant retail component into that area of Urbana. I guess what I'd like to do is just walk you through briefly. We're at the early stages of this, and as you know, the reason that you're seeing this at such an early stage is I have an option to purchase the property, and will purchase the property if I think there's a viable project that can be done, and this, of course, is a key component of this project being viable. So I've asked staff to move forward with this on a very rapid schedule, to get it in front of you, to allow you to consider it, see if you think it's in the interest of Urbana, which I firmly believe it is, and we can take a look at it, and I'd be glad to answer any questions. This is something that what we'd like to call it, in keeping with the theme of it being a gateway to downtown Urbana, we're talking about calling it Gateway Shops at 5 Points. It is designed to be a significant retail presence in excess of 50,000 square feet of retail with, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. I wanted to feature some of the discussion of the gateway component and just what a critical intersection we have and what a unique opportunities. You can see the Gateway Shops. I know the council has these handouts. The Gateway Shops would be located at the corner of Cunningham and University. It's one of the highest traffic counts in Champaign County. It's very visible, and for the sake of downtown Urbana, it's at a high traffic area, which would introduce a much more public and obvious entryway to downtown Urbana. It's also able to very uniquely tie into, in fact, it backs up to some Park District land, even there on the north, as well as being kitty corner to Crystal Lake Park. I think this kind of high-quality development in that location can take advantage of such a nice amenity there and try to tie in as much as we possibly can pedestrian access, for instance, from Crystal Lake Park, and of course also along the west University, and take advantage of some of our doctors and nurses and others at Carle Hospital just down the street to the west. In addition, what I'm hoping that this will do, and what I believe this can do for us, is pull the downtown further north. You have made tremendous progress in a number of important developments, Stratford being one of the most recent, in bringing the downtown further north along Ray Street and along Broadway. What I think this does is provide a capstone for that movement of the downtown and that increased density that I think is in the long-term interest of both the downtown and the city of Urbana. Looks like we are missing a couple pictures here. Looks like we're playing tic-tac-toe. Actually, those are supposed to be pictures. What I've done in this slide, in the version that the pictures are actually present, is talk about one of the important features that is actually key, I think, in providing that linkage and that gateway component and really tying this in with downtown. And if I had those pictures in there, what you would see is the streetscaping that the city has invested so much time and effort in, and I think very successfully, to begin to give the downtown a real presence and a real character, and one of the things that we would very much seek to do is to have that character continue through the Gateway Shop, so that it begins to tie into the downtown in that way. Most importantly, what this project does is bring significant retail. We all are aware that there have been some challenges and in some regard, bringing large amounts of retail to Urbana. I think this is a perfect opportunity of where it can be extraordinarily successful. Basically, when you're looking at retail development, you want to focus on two things, traffic count and demographics. The traffic count at this site is very significant. It is one of the higher in Champaign County. It's got 80,600 cars that pass by through the four components of that intersection on a daily basis. And just to give you a basis of comparison, looking at the Old Farm intersection in Champaign, which is Mattis and Kirby, they have an average daily traffic count substantially below this, about 67,000 cars on a daily basis. And in fact, it's that Old Farm model that you're going to see that we're looking for. We think that is a very good representation of the kind of quality and the kind of retail shops that we're going to be marketing to at this location. I've also there given you some numbers on some of the types of traffic counts expected before any of these retailers would even give serious consideration to even looking at a site. You can see CVS is 30,000. A number of others are in that area, and we're fortunate to have a site that exceeds that. The objective, of course, is a significant amount of retail. We expect in excess of 50,000 square feet of retail. Just as a base of comparison, the square footage at Old Farm is actually 47,000 square feet. So in terms of basic size, certainly this would be in that order of magnitude. And frankly, I think there's probably a little bit more size that we might be able to do if we get the right combination of retailers associated there. Speaking of the right combination of retailers, we're looking for, going to be looking for clothing, electronics, espresso bar, steakhouse, winery, banking, dry cleaners, cellular, even hotel. And I put hotel not because we designated and went out of our way to look for hotel, but rather hotels come to us and said they like that site and they might be interested in doing that. And so certainly that would be something we could consider. Bakery, hair salon are other examples of things that we would be marketing this site to. Looks like we have another problem with our pictures. This is a very large file, by the way. You have, though we do not, you have a couple of, in your handouts, a couple of the alternative site plans that we're looking at. And again, this is very early in the process. So what I've done is work with our architect to begin to lay out basically building locations to get a sense for how these buildings might lay out and how they would then interact with traffic and how the flow of traffic might work at this site. The first item, the first layout is concept A, and that is one in which actually the basic shape is fairly similar to Old Farm. One of the nice advantages we have here is considerably better traffic flow through the site by separating the building, which is going from east to west on the north side of the site from the building that is on the west. In terms of the square footage of that set of buildings, that is about 60,000 square feet as designated in that drawing. And again, I would emphasize that this drawing is really for spatial layout of buildings relative to the current existing site. Study concept B is another one we've looked at. And this one we've looked at for a couple of reasons, but partly because we have been approached by a number of users that we weren't necessarily expecting, one of those being a hotel. So we've incorporated actually something that's very similar in a lot of respects to Old Farm, in that it's taking advantage of that corner of Cunningham and University. And then we've got some other uses in addition to that are to the west of that, one being a hotel. Those are a couple of the alternatives. As Dr. Tyler mentioned, this is something that we would be working with the city staff to develop these concepts and to make sure that we're incorporating as many advantages for all parties as possible. Obviously, we have to focus on making sure it's a successful retail development. That's the way in which we would hope to generate significant tax revenue for the city of Urbana. But we think because of the location and access and proximity to Crystal Lake Park and to the core of downtown, we have some unique opportunities and look forward to working with staff to take advantage of those opportunities. This is, in terms of kind of a basic look of the retail development. We would expect it to be one story, with the exception perhaps of some of these other uses like a hotel, but the vast majority here is purely classic retail, similar to Old Farm Shops, which you see in the top picture in Windsor Galleria. The other reason that I show these two slides is because these are also representative of the type of materials and quality that we would be looking to make sure that is incorporated into this development at 5 Points. We have done a number of renderings and looked at the site and looked at how we might incorporate the buildings, and one such rendering there is provided. And again, you should be noticing the similarity between the types of things that we have in mind and some of the other, what I would regard as high-quality retail developments in our community. In terms of timing, this is a fairly complicated deal in terms of timing. The objective here is to get as much high-quality retail to that site as quickly as we can, making sure that it's done in the correct way. And because of the circumstances with the site currently, in particular, there is a tenant at the site, O'Brien Auto Park, which, as you've even discussed this evening, has plans to move north of I-74. It is in the interim between any approval that you might have of this plan and the movement of O'Brien to their next new site that we would take advantage of to market this such that we maximize the speed by which we can get this done, and secondly, use that time to make sure we can get it to the maximum advantage in terms of the quality of that project. In terms of marketing, that would begin immediately upon any indication from the city that this is something you want to pursue. We are hopeful, as we've got a February 8th deadline to close or not to close on this property, that we can have a consideration of this project over the next few weeks and get an indication from you how you want to proceed with that. We have also a number of other components to this project that we're going to be working with other entities to incorporate. There has been a previous agreement between the Urbana Park District and the current owner of the site to swap some land to improve both the Park District land just to the north in terms of its geographic layout, as well as improve the site that we have in mind for the retail component. That would be done by March of this year. We would be working with staff between now and then to work on a number of components to the design such that the staff and yourselves, of course, would be very comfortable with the quality and type of development that's being put in at this important location. Building permits would be requested as early as possible, and again, probably one of the key dates there is November 2006, which is the last date at which O'Brien can remain at the property under the current lease structure. They have an option. They have a current contract which brings them to end of October 2005. They have a one-year option on that contract which they may or may not exercise, and what we've done here is incorporate a worst-case scenario in terms of timing to ensure that we would be in a position to move forward on the dates that we've given here. Shortly after the O'Brien move takes place, we would submit for building permits. Shortly after that, begin the demolition and construction as quickly after that as feasible. I would love to entertain any comments or questions.
Okay, should we hear from Mr. Walden and then kind of do a sweep through questions? I think it might be best to get all the information on the table first. Mr. Walden.
The last piece of this is the agreement, and I think it might be helpful to review the financial obligations of the city. As Dr. Tyler mentioned, the council will see again the site plan and some of the design considerations. One of the things that we will have for sure before us is the final layout, traffic considerations, and all of that, but we'll consider that at a different time. The firm commitment that we need to make in order to enable the developer to proceed with this purchase, which is a substantial purchase, is the financial obligations within the development agreement. And as you're accustomed to at this point, if you would primarily turn to the city covenants and agreements, which is on page 7. Most of this agreement, as you know, was boilerplate. The meat of it is the developer obligations and the city obligations. I want to review those city financial obligations for you. The first obligation that we have is in 3.1A, which is the amounts of incremental property taxes to be reinvested in the project. And as we have almost developed a policy on at this point, we're looking at, in this agreement, as we have in others, 80% of the property taxes revenues invested into the project for retail and 50% on office uses. This is something that standard that we've used in a couple of other agreements, and it served us well, provides an incentive to use this very valuable piece of land for retail and not for office, and that's generally the direction that we'd like to go. The second part of that is, I might note that the initial EAV would be taking out of the increased assessment, which would reflect what's there now. We would obviously want to back out of the equation, which is in paragraph B, the assessed value that exists, and that's something that we do in order to determine the increment, and that's roughly $1 million. Another important piece of the financial components are the term, and again, we have used 10 years as a period, a time frame on most of our development agreements as a period of investment by the city back into the project. And that's the case here. I would note that the 10 years begins with the issuance of any C of O for Phase 1. So the clock starts ticking. Again, this is a difficult agreement to get our arms around because of the time frame is so long, but the 10 years starts potentially in 2007 or 2008 when Phase 1 is complete. So those are primarily the TIF investments that we will make. So it's 80% back for retail, 50% back for office. The term is 10 years. The term starts with the issuance of C of O on Phase 1. All of those are contained in Section 3.1. An additional financial obligation of the city is to do certain improvements in and around the public right-of-way, including but not limited to some utility relocation, landscaping, and other improvements. And we've, at this point, put $150,000 in as the amount that we would need for that investment. I'm not sure, to be quite honest with you, in future budget years, has been my experience as we get into some of these projects. I'm not certain that that's enough, but that's what we're committing to, the minimum we're committing to at this time to the developer. We also commit to undertake certain cooperative efforts with IDOT and others in review of the traffic and other design considerations of the project. So I just wanted to touch again on what those specific financial obligations are of the city. Again, the developer and Libby have gone through the time frames. All of those are contained within the developer's obligation and his commitments to move forward. You do have on your desk a 5 Points West cash flow. This cash flow takes a look at only TIF real estate taxes. It does not look at revenues to the general fund. It does not compute and estimate the amount of utility taxes to be provided or the amount of sales taxes to be provided by the development, which could be quite substantial given what we're looking at here in the range of several $100,000 a year. But those are not included within these estimates. This is simply an estimate of how the TIF incentives and the TIF revenues work within the district. It does not impact at all the general fund in the revenue side or expenditure side. So if you take a look at this, what you have is 5 Points West cash flow. This assumes a mix of 50% retail and 50% office. It's the desire of the developer to go all retail, which is great, but for the purposes of making an estimate, we did 50-50. If you look at a couple of development sizes here, if you look under developer benefit, you'll see we have a project of one, just to make an estimate, one of $7 million and one of $9.2 million. If you follow those lines through, there's two sets of lines. You will see the annual payments that would be made on that 65% basis to the developer, which is the developer cash flow, and then that would end based upon the schedule that you have in 2017, and then you'll see the zeros on out. The present value of that could range anywhere from $500,000 to $750,000 at 65%. If it were 80% all retail, it could be somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million or more, depending on the size. If it's a bigger project, it would be more. As you know, the balance of the annual revenues accrue to the TIF district. So if we're looking at 65% in this basis, it's 35% on the bottom two revenue lines. You'll see again the two project sizes. If you follow those through in each calendar year, you'll see the amount of revenues accruing to the district. The difference being, if you look at the termination of the developer incentive was in 2018, the district would continue to accrue those benefits until 2022. Again, you'll see these present values of what those revenues are to the district, and they're quite substantial because of the many years there, the final years that are not providing any incentive to the developer but are totally revenues to the district. So you'll find there that if you use the same present value calculations, you're looking at 65%, somewhere between $651,000 and $1 million benefit to the district. Those funds are used for other projects or for capital projects or other activities within the district. Of course, at the end of 2022, the entire $1 million accrues to all the other taxing districts, which is obviously the point of all of this. Again, there's no general fund revenue estimate. Just a quick estimate, if you did $10 million in sales, you'd have $200,000 in new sales taxes. I did not estimate utility taxes. But you can see that from a project-only basis that we're looking at considerably more revenues to the district than are being paid out in incentives, even on the short-term basis. And this is consistent with our policies on some of the other projects that we've done. So that gives you a quick look at that. If you have questions about this snapshot of the cash flow, give me a call. We can produce different types of views of this if you want to look at it. I suppose I could do present values of sales tax and other revenues, but again, since this is sort of a pre-development agreement, we don't know the specific uses. That would be sort of academic at this point, I guess. So. But this does provide some guidance and some information on what the benefit is to the city financially, which is substantial. So those are generally the financial obligations of the city and the impacts to the TIF fund. Okay.
We'll hear questions from committee members to Mr. Petrie or our staff members. Mr. Alley.
Just a couple. Can you describe the details of the Park District land swap? What's Tract A and what's Tract B?
Let's see. You have the drawings. I can probably describe them best. If you look at Site A or Concept A, we'll just look at that one. If you look at the long building going from east to west that would be on this site, approximately 50 feet behind that site is currently Park District land. and that would be swapped to the development. Actually, if you look to the, I guess, right kind of in the center on the north side of the site, you can see a little gray line. That currently is all parking lot associated with the O'Brien site. So basically, we would extend this site for the retail development a little bit north, 50 feet wide, for the extent there, and then they would extend their track to the east.
Okay.
With about roughly equivalent square footage. We would pay I think, $26,000 in marginal difference for the value of the land.
Okay. Question about, or a comment, I guess, more about neighborhood services. Of course, you're aware that to the north of Crystal Lake Drive, there'll soon be a project to redevelop the current site of Lakeside Terrace as more mixed-income housing, and there actually is a considerable potential customer base in residential located to the north of this site. I would hope that as we look at designs, and I realize it's premature to look at site plans, but as we look at site plans, I would hope we'd take into account making it accessible to that community to the north as well, that maybe rather than just, facing a sea of dumpsters, they'd actually have a inviting view of this use, because I think neighborhood, despite the high traffic counts, which is obviously going to generate a lot of traffic, I think one of the unique advantages of this site is its proximity to an underserved residential area to the north, which also represents a pretty significant customer base.
Very good point.
And my other comment was regarding the hotel. What type of a hotel would you be envisioning?
Well, to be honest, this is based on an approach from a hotel to us, and the details are a little bit murky to myself because we haven't been advised of all these things because there's a deadline. So I really can't give you much detail there.
My only concern is that on this tract and tract to the east, there have been considerable issues with hotels in the past. I don't know if you're familiar with the former Charterhouse Inn. Some of the other properties there have been considerable law enforcement issues and so forth. We would hope that if you're entering into an agreement with a developer of a hotel, it would be a reputable national organization that has a history of running safe and attractive properties.
Just to give you an indication, it would be on the order of, and I'm not saying this is it because I truly don't know, but Hampton Inn, something along those lines.
Okay, so some type of a national chain.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Roberts.
I noticed that from the original layout plan, and I know this isn't finalized yet, the schematic originally had shown that we had received about a couple in our packets, showed that the stores were more modular and that the parking was interspersed fairly evenly throughout the lot. And now the two different development concept sites that you're showing us tonight seems to lump the parking more together, and the stores are on the periphery. And I'm especially kind of thinking about site plan A, which looks like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-lane parking lot, which is the major feature that one sees from University Avenue. Now, my understanding of downtown development was that the desired effect would be to have the stores closer to the street and the parking somewhat buried or integrated into the lot in somewhat of a different configuration. And I think it's more successful in concept B, which you said is a little bit more like Old Farm. But I'm just thinking if this is the direction that it's changed since the initial drawing was made out, I'm wondering if the planning department has looked at that and feels it's consistent with the overall comprehensive plan perspective of city development in the downtown.
Well, I think there's parking requirements that probably aren't met in the plan that's in your packet. So in terms of feasible development, parking supply and layout, probably the ones this evening are closer there, but you're right, they're very different in terms of what you see from the two roads. And this is always a concern. We like to see buildings close to the street and parking hidden, but the actuality is that retailers want to have a lot of visibility to parking so that people know that they can get there and walk in.
Well, I realize you can see into the lot, but we do have a couple other locations right in the downtown area, where you were presented mainly with a face of parked cars first, and then you would find the building in the back. And it's just not as favorable a layout, and I'm just saying that, this is something that, since you're still planning it, I hope you would consider the effect.
Absolutely. I appreciate your comments, and I myself have observed that. And recall that we're playing with concepts and locations here, and in particular, as we try to locate some of these buildings, it's important to know, have your input. What I would say about Site Plan A, well, first of all, I guess I would say I also prefer Site Plan B. But what I would say about Site Plan A is, first of all, that really designates a lot of parking when we're talking to architects at early stages. We're thinking about square footage. We're thinking about vehicular traffic and flow, and so we're trying to get a feel for how that's going to happen in concert with some of the initial phases of the development. What frequently will happen, and what I would expect to happen in this location, would be to have a number of outlots, probably 2, that would be along University Avenue, that would be a part of that development. And typically, in fact, if you watched, and I was here for part of the time when Old Farm was developed, and I've seen it happen time and time again, to introduce the visibility to the overall development. Frequently, the outlots are left to a second stage, and the outlots in the case of Old Farm is a Panera's and a bank.
Yes.
And those are, probably, I think, more in line with what you're hoping, while probably, although I would say maybe not exactly. And this is a comment that I would have. I've looked at the downtown plan, and I've looked at the comprehensive plan, and this is different than that, because, in fact, there's no parking visible in the comprehensive plan, and that's, one of the key responsibilities for this to work out for the city and to work out as a development is we've got to take into account not a lot of things, including the aesthetics and also including the reality of the way customers do retail shopping. So, as far as I'm concerned, it's a matter of trying to come up with the best possible combination that meets as many needs as possible. But it's certainly something we look forward to working with you and staff to make sure that it's acceptable to all parties.
Thank you.
Are you finished? Yeah. Other questions? Mr. Hayes.
In keeping with the situation, I think this is a wonderful project. The photos we've seen are very aesthetically presented, and it should entice bigger and better projects to the east of 5 Points. Now, while we're talking about aesthetics, I noticed you mentioned the Park District on several occasions, as if by having that hotel there and the shopping centers, that people might have a tendency to go to the park and relax and enjoy themselves. And you mentioned that several times. So I'm wondering, in the process, are you and maybe the Park District might get together and, since Crystal Lake is a beautiful park, to make it a little more aesthetic and make it less geese friendly?
I won't comment on the geese part. I think that's illegal to do anything bad about geese.
A lot of us think that's comical, but it's not, especially if you enjoy walking around Crystal Lake Park.
I think it's
you can't, a lot of people like to fish from the banks. They can't fish from the banks anymore.
I think
of the geese.
it's a unique opportunity to take advantage of Crystal Lake Park. It's a park that I've enjoyed since growing up in this town. I'd like to see the community be able to enjoy it more than we currently are. I think with this development and with the developments to the north, that is a very nice opportunity. I would say, this is going to have to be something we work on together and try to come up with good solutions. Certainly my heart is with you in terms of being very environmentally friendly and focused. I'm actually on the Champaign Park District Board, and that's a commitment that I've made to focus on those kinds of issues, and I would hope that we can incorporate some of those components in this development.
Dr. Tyler?
I understand from the Park District that they will be starting a master plan process for Crystal Lake Park to upgrade and improve, make it more accessible, and just bring it up to date, and that'll probably be in the coming years, so hopefully there will be more opportunities to work with them.
Other questions from committee members? If not, Chair would entertain a motion.
What kind of a motion?
I believe we have an ordinance to execute a redevelopment agreement.
I would move that we send this to staff for a draft so that we might consider it more concrete.
Just to clarify, Mr. Whalen, there's a development agreement before us, so instead of, it's not a discussion item, there's actually an ordinance before us, so you could move to send it to council.
Yes, okay, I'll do that, move it to send it to council.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Todd?
Well, just to address one of the questions from Mr. Kaufman, he's no longer here, but in talking about the financial incentives, and we've got the cash flows for this particular project, and for the TIF districts in general, there's an acknowledgement that the sites, the development sites in the core area that need to be redeveloped, that is, that they have existing infrastructure and existing buildings. You heard Mr. Petrie talk about the demolition that was going to have to occur at some point early on in the redevelopment, the relocation of utilities, the relocation of driveways, and that type of thing. Those are costs that are generally higher on these redevelopment sites than they are in the outskirts of town. And that's what TIF districts are for, is to help defray some of those costs. I don't know if they're going to be looking at any environmental remediation costs, but certainly in some of the TIF developments that we've had in the past, the Chinooks, they ran into about $400,000 of environmental remediation because there were a lot of dumping was going on probably in the 20s and 30s along the railroad tracks. And so this is the type of thing that TIF districts are set up for, so that they can defray some of the extraordinary costs of redevelopment for the developer. And so, as Mr. Walden said, we, for reimbursing 80% of the increment generated by the project for retail, is something that we've done in other TIF projects, and 50% for office. And that makes sense. That for us, it means that we don't have to write a check out of our general reserve fund or even the TIF fund. The money comes into the TIF, and then we write the check based on a portion of that, the 80% or the 50%, and give that back to the developer.
Any other comments, Mr. Alex?
I'd just like to, add to the mayor's comments, and that's is another sort of significant principle underlying the TIF districts, and that's that the benefits to the city and to the other taxing districts considerably outlive the incentives. And so it's easy to look at one of these projects and say that, the city's pouring a bunch of money into County Plaza so they can improve their infrastructure, or for marketing expenses, or for a project like this. And I think, one of the things that makes it pretty obvious on its face how effective these developments are is if you just compare the lifetime of one of these buildings after it's been improved, or a development like this, and how long that generates property tax revenue and sales tax revenue for the city versus the relatively short period of time for which we provide incentives. I think if you look at this, it's tough to find one of these TIF projects where the numbers don't eventually favor the city and the taxing districts.
Okay, Mr. Walden, you had a hand up.
Oh,
Mr.
just a couple of caveats here. We do have a couple exhibits that we'll need to add between now and the end of the week, legal descriptions primarily, and there might be one or two small tweaks in this. I'll tell you one of them now. I didn't have a chance to get to this today, but just for full disclosure, I think in the schedule that you have, it does require that the developer execute the agreement with the Park District a year after the closing on Tract A, and I think that that's probably something we want to make optional rather than mandatory. If it turns out that this development will go forward without the land swap, we should allow that to take place without collapsing the agreement. If it's necessary, well, that'll work too. So that's a small tweak I know is coming, and then the legal descriptions are coming, and then there may be one or two other. So we'll disclose those to you next week prior to the action of the council.
Okay, Mr. Roberts?
Well, I was just going to say that if my recollection is correct, over, I don't know if it's as small a number as 428 or something, municipalities in Illinois use TIF district promotions to have begun to do so to develop their downtowns and other infrastructure projects in their communities. And so if Urbana is one of those, we're not alone in feeling that it's an appropriate and useful tool to develop important parts of the downtown.
Ms. Pat?
For next week, may we please have a map that shows the land swap, the map of what it is now with just the two little boxes? So I think I understand it, but I'd like to see it.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Mayor?
Well, just one other comment. I'd like to thank Joe for bringing this to us, and I really think his vision is exactly what we'd like to see there at 5 Points. The Gateway Shops looks like it would be a perfect thing for the gateway of Urbana. It really is a gateway. Two exits off the interstate end up right there at University in Cunningham, and so we want that to look as nice as possible, and we certainly saw that from the vision that Joe has with this particular project. So I would just want to thank you, Joe, for bringing this to us, and certainly encourage the council to pass this on to council, or the committee to pass it on to council next week, or in 2 weeks.
That's correct. We have a fifth Monday.
Fifth Monday.
So council members should remember that. Any other further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Petrie.
Thank you for your consideration.
Next, we have we're going to have a discussion about domestic partner registry for City of Urbana. And what I thought we would do is I could provide a presentation from the yellow document that's sitting in front of you. You have a lot of pieces of paper in front of you, but the yellow. And then we would go to members of the public and then have a question and answer. So without necessarily reading through this entire piece of paper, basically, due to a state law in Illinois, the Defense of Marriage Act, same-sex couples don't have the legal right to civil marriage, and yet we have same-sex and opposite-sex couples living as domestic partners in our city. And we have a long distinguished history of opposing discrimination in our city, as Robert Michael Doyle, I think, at our last meeting discussed this issue. So basically, there's a list here of problems that unmarried couples face. Those problems, most people are generally unaware of the problems that unmarried couples face, including things that we can't particularly do anything about as a city of Urbana, since we don't have the right to provide marriage licenses to same-sex couples or opposite-sex couples, for that matter. It's the county that enjoys that right as via state ordinance. So until there's marriage equality on the state and federal level, what the city of Urbana can do is to update our codes to reflect the fact that we have unmarried partners in our community, those who have chosen not to be married, as well as those who by law cannot marry in this country, And we also have the option of providing a domestic partner registry for unmarried partners to register their relationships with the city. There's two issues actually on our agenda for tonight. The first one, the first one is the domestic partner registry, and the second is the code and policy update. I'm going to reserve my comments about code and policy until we get to that on the agenda item. With the domestic partner registry, essentially, and Ms. Wyman did provide some materials in your packet, dozens of cities and counties and a handful of states provide domestic partner registries, including Cook County and Oak Park, Illinois. Basically, in talking about specifically the domestic partner registry piece of this, there are several benefits to providing such a registry. The first is that the city can know, for the sake of code enforcement, who qualifies as a domestic partner. Second, employers who offer domestic partner benefits will have one place to go to determine domestic partner status for their employees, and a registry can save employers time and paperwork so that there's not as many systems out there as there are employers who provide domestic partner benefits. The third benefit is that when partners come to register at the city, they can receive valuable information about what this status does and does not provide. Many people are unaware of, they take certain things for granted, or they assume that they may have rights that they actually do not have, and in coming to the city they can find out about the rights they don't have. They can also find out about places in the community that acknowledge domestic partners, such as the University of Illinois, which is our biggest employer in the community, provides domestic partner benefits to its employees. The Park District essentially categorizes family as two adults living with dependent children, or two adults living together in a household environment. So the Park District essentially provides a domestic partner acknowledgement for the sake of family passes at the pool, etc. But this is something that people don't particularly know about, and may assume that because they're not a married couple, they can't enjoy some of the privileges that that come along with being married partners when they actually can. Also, it would be useful for them to understand the way in which local hospitals and clinics acknowledge domestic partner benefits. Domestic partnerships. And I did call both of the hospitals today in Urbana and talk to them to ask them questions about how do they deal with domestic partners, because obviously there are people who are engaged but aren't married yet, and someone gets sick and they're in the ER room, and how do they solve that? There are same-sex couples who have been living together for 20 years who have 6 children together, and how do they deal with that? And so there are lots of ways in which we have families in Urbana. And so the answer from both hospitals was that basically under HIPAA law, which is the Patient Privacy Act, the patients designate who they wish to have access to direct their care, to come to visit them, etc. So, for example, it is the case that a wife could not permit her husband to enter into the hospital and visit her. So it isn't necessarily a right conveyed by marriage that a person, just because they're married, has the right to access their loved one in the hospital if that loved one does not actually want that access. That's the understanding based on the conversations I had with both PR departments at the hospitals. So these are the kinds of things that people could also, in the educational piece, come to understand by registering. The fourth benefit is that a domestic partner registry provides partners with recognition of their relationship, and it should be, I think, noted here that separate is not equal, that this is not domestic partners. This is not the ideas. I think we should not argue that we're providing full equality with this, because we're obviously not. The list on the front page just gives you the beginning of an understanding of what the difference is between kind of federally recognized marriages and what we're talking about here. I do want, on point number 1, which is the city can know for the sake of code enforcement, I think that just for our purposes, both for this discussion and the next discussion, one thing to know is that in my review of code and policy in Urbana, there are at least 3 places where the relationship of domestic partner is relevant. The first is our over-occupancy law, which prohibits more than 4 unrelated people, and we're talking about changing that to adults, from living together. That's currently in place, and there's no way right now to necessarily recognize domestic partners in that situation. And the second is our gift ban exception in our ethics ordinance, which includes the language domestic partner, but according to the ordinance that I saw online does not provide a definition. And then our third is the personnel policies, which we worked on this last summer, which provide partial benefits, excluding health insurance at this point, to the partners of our employees in same-sex relationships. And this policy does include a process by which an employee provides domestic partner status. So that kind of gives us an overview of, right now, the picture of how the city looks at domestic partners. And at that point, I think what I'd like to do at this point, just in terms of process, is to allow the member of the public who wanted to speak to this point after the presentation to speak, and then what we'll do is we will come back and ask questions and have a discussion. And I do have a motion which is before you, which I plan to make. So first I want to acknowledge Julie Watkins at 805 East Green Street, who does not choose to address the committee but is in support of a domestic partner registry. And second, to speak before us is Robert Michael Doyle.
I want to remind you I live in Champaign. Part of what I'm going to say is a repeat of some remarks I made last week and then some elaboration on them, including a couple of things I forgot to mention. I came before you last week simply to compliment you and remind you that you were the first city in the state of Illinois to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation, and that the state is catching up with you. And at that time, the legislature, the General Assembly, had passed the bill. Since then, the governor has signed it. One of the things I forgot to mention is the bill does not go into effect until June 1st. So anyone listening to me who does not live or work in Champaign or Urbana should not be coming out to possible discriminators until after June 1st. Keep that in mind, please. I then touched on the issue of the unrelated people and so forth, and discussed domestic partner, suggested a domestic partner registry. Was not aware that some of you were already working on that, and that the issue was going to come before you. I had to leave regardless, even after Ms. Wyman informed me of that, because I needed to go to a mass that was being said for the repose of the soul of Dean Gaylord Hatch, and I did not want to miss that. So I'm sorry I missed your later discussion, but I had no choice. What I elaborate on, I did mention that there are a variety of people from other places coming here who actually come with same-sex marriages, from Belgium, Netherlands, eventually Spain. They also come with civil unions from Norway and Denmark. There will probably be other places with civil unions. Correction, there is marriage, same-sex marriage, in this nation, in the state of Massachusetts. And there is a couple living in Urbana who have a Massachusetts same-sex marriage. And there may be others, but I know one by name. What I had not mentioned last week is for several years in this town, in both cities, various religious groups have been performing holy union ceremonies for same-sex couples. So there are a wide number of people in this town who have what they consider to be a religious same-sex marriage. And anyway, I just want to repeat that, yes, I think you're moving faster than I expected, but thank you. I am strongly in support of a domestic partner registry, and I hope you would make it open to people living outside of Urbana. I also feel that it won't cost you anything, because you obviously have a right to charge for these certificates and charge the amount that it costs to you, to the city. I think also, I am speaking only in favor of registry for same-sex couples. It is my observation, my personal observation, that straight couples can get married and unmarried at a very simple and very fast rate, and I'm amazed at the number of both celebrities who have proved this to us and congresspersons who have proved this to us, including our own congressperson, who seems to be on his way towards another whatever. Anyway, he's not living with his most previous wife. And so, which was revealed by that story about his daughter running for city council. And I thought that was interesting. Anyway, that's the sacredness of marriage to some people. So, I speak only in favor of registry for same-sex couples. I'm not interested in people who can get married and unmarried at will. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Hayes?
You seem to mention this married couple living in Urbana from Massachusetts.
Their marriage was in Massachusetts. They're longtime residents of Champaign.
But,
Urbana.
But that's not recognized in the state of Illinois.
No, it's not. According to the Defense of Marriage Law.
So,
Well, none of these things I've mentioned are recognized by state law.
But I was wondering why you wanted to make it relevant to this.
Because there are people in town who have relationships, very strong, committed relationships, who've gone to some trouble, in fact, most people do not go to Massachusetts to get married while they're living in Urbana. There is a couple, there are two couples, well, one couple is in Champaign, but there's one couple living in Urbana who got married in Toronto 2 Thanksgivings ago. I was house sitting for them at the time. So these relationships exist. They're very important to these people. And I think you ought to recognize it as a city.
Next question. When these same-sex couples register, with the city of Urbana, it has no effect on any other community except those who have same-sex registry. So my question is, these registries will be open to the public, right?
Well, it would be whatever you write, but I'm telling you what I hope you would write, which would be one that's, yes, that it would be a public record. It would be a way of them making a public statement, as married people do, about being together.
So it's also the possibility that it might have a detrimental effect.
Yes, but but people feel strongly about having their relationships recognized, and people are already, doing the things that they can do. Or more interesting recent development that is actually separate from the University of Illinois, because the University of Illinois Alumni Association runs itself. The Alumni Association magazine has, for 2 or 3 years or more now, been listing commitment or union ceremonies for same-sex couples among the alumni, in the same place that they list the marriages of alumni. So it's interesting. I myself, quite a few years ago, didn't expect that this much explosion of interest in our community in this subject. It is a grassroots movement among gay and lesbian people. It is not actually being promoted by the organizations, and the political organizations, state, national, simply were not interested in this issue. The leaders were not. Many of the leaders were, in fact, opposed to the idea of marriage because of it being copying heterosexuality. But this is a grassroots thing. Those lawsuits are coming from individual couples. There are now organizations who realize that this is an extremely important issue to ordinary gay people who are, coming in on it. But this is a basic grassroots gay movement, not a an organized homosexual conspiracy. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
Other questions from Robert Michael Dole? Mr. Alex?
I just have one. I'm hung up on this issue of same-sex versus opposite-sex domestic partnership. I would think...
I'm expressing a personal...
I
a lot of gay people who disagree with it.
I understand, but I'm going to frame this by saying that I think that to the extent that I support this because any situation in which the city has said there's an economic or public benefit to some property right or a right under an ordinance being available to a household of two people as opposed to an individual, treating those two cohabiting individuals as a household rather than as two separate individuals. It doesn't seem to me that it should concern the city whether they are of the same sex, opposite sex, whether they're romantically involved or whether there's something like a caregiver and an elderly recipient of care or war buddies or whoever else it is, right, who for whatever reason find themselves cohabiting as a household. If you want us to be sympathetic to this argument that this should be restricted to same-sex couples, I guess I'd like you to elaborate more on your basis for that.
I'm saying I'm not interested in they got marriage. Use it. We don't have marriage. We can't use it. We'd like a large number of us would like to use it. So this is sort of like an in-between thing. This is all we can get for the time being.
I guess what I'm
I have no objection to what you're saying.
I guess what I'm asking is,
I'm just not going to work for their, the thing that they don't really need.
Is there some undercurrent here that this should only apply to relationships with some romantic component, or is it?
Well,
that's
what I'm most interested in. But it's true, well, actually, the thing is, I'm concerned about the fact that our people can't get married. Now, when you go through your ordinances, there are ordinances that deal with things beyond whether the people are married or not. And it's quite correct. If you're talking about who can live in a house, that goes beyond the romantic relationships. There could be relationships in that house that you ought to recognize also. And I especially notice, apparently, there is no provision now for recognizing foster children as family members.
Depending on how you read the ordinance, yeah.
Well, what I meant, I'm just going by what I read. But obviously, if that's the case, that needs to be changed. I mean, that's a very important relationship that the city should be fostering, to use the same word. Fostering should be encouraged and no impediment put in its way. No, I just...
Okay.
But I'm speaking very strongly for recognition, as much as possible, of the same-sex relationships of those people who wish to register them.
Okay. Thank you for your input. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. At this point, we'll take the questions and then put a motion on the table, and then we can discuss that motion. Ms. Wyman and then Ms. Pat.
I was actually going to make comments, if that's all right. This is an issue I think that council members have heard about for certainly several years, and I've gotten several constituents who have contacted me over the years who are interested in the establishment of the domestic partner registry. Certainly our discussions last week regarding the issue, concerns about ordinance and occupancy levels, I think have put this issue of domestic partner registry on an accelerated level or at an accelerated pace. So there's interest there's I think the dual interest of one, making sure that we provide some way to measure or to be able to address the concerns or issues brought up in our zoning ordinance, and as Ms. Chenoweth pointed out in her memo, with other issues like our personnel policies, and then also the concern that other constituents have brought forward over the years is being able to have some sort of legal recognition of their domestic partnership, whether it's prohibited by law as is for gay and lesbian couples who are in committed relationships, or straight couples who are not interested in marriage because of the issues that brings up. And so I think that it seems to me, if council members are supportive, and I think there is support for domestic partner registries, there are two issues that I see have come up, and I hope council members, as we give direction to staff to draft a domestic partner registry, if we could give input on that, and that is who would be eligible, whether it would be just gay and lesbian couples, or whether we'd allow straight couples who obviously, as Mr. Robert Michael Doyle has stated, already have the benefit of marriage, and so, but if we want to allow it for people in committed relationships, regardless of whether they're gay or straight. And I guess I'm inclined to allow, based on the constituent comments I've gotten, to allow for both, or to provide for both. And the other is who would be eligible as far as residency. If you look at some of the documents that were passed out, in Oak Park, you have to have lived together in Oak Park for at least 6 months, but again, it's a residency requirement that's on the first page of the stapled packet that was on your desk. In Cook County, you or your partner, or you and your partner have to have lived in Cook County, or you or your partner must work in Cook County. So there's that either or requirement of residency or working in Cook County. It seems to me that, or I guess I think I'd like to see us allowing anyone to be able to register with Urbana's Domestic Partner Registry Program, regardless of whether they live in Urbana or work in Urbana or don't have that sort of connection. And I don't know if there's a statutory requirement or an issue with home rule laws that would require some sort of closer connection or nexus between residency or work in Urbana and registering the Domestic Partner Registry Program. So I suppose it's something we'd need to get staff legal to look up and make sure about, if council is interested in having an expanded Domestic Partner Registry Program that allows for that sort of registry, again, of anyone. I think Hollywood, is it West Hollywood, California, which was the first city to allow for domestic partner registries, or to have a registry, allows for anyone, regardless of your residency, to be able to register there. And it certainly provides some benefits for people living outside of the city limits to be able to, if their employer allows for benefits at their place of employment, if they're registered, then you don't have to be registered in the same city, or you don't have to. Your city doesn't have to have a registry in order to be able to take advantage of some of the benefits that you would otherwise get if you were registered, or if your city did have a registry. The final issue I want to note is in Oak Park, they have a $50 fee for registration. In Cook County, it's a $30 fee for registration. I don't know that the fee is really that important. Just that it's something, obviously, that could be made to be revenue neutral, and depending on what sort of things are given out, or the actual costs involved in establishing the program and continuing it, we could establish a fee that would be consistent in that, similar to, and add that to our list of, or our fee schedule. Thank you.
Ms. Pat.
Thank you. I think a fee is important if we're going to allow persons who are not Urbana residents to register, because we should make sure that the cost, obviously this isn't going to be an astronomical cost, but the cost of running and maintaining the registry is covered by the users if it's going to be a service beyond city limits. In terms of who should be covered, actually I agree with Mr. Doyle, and always have my sentiments about this is about providing needed protection to people who have no other recourse under law. Our Human Relations Commission has been discussing this, not within the context of domestic partner benefits or registry, but, well, I guess a little bit benefits, with regard to the city's family leave and bereavement policy, and it is the opinion of many commissioners, possibly all of them, that a policy that applies only to same-sex couples is discriminatory based on sexual orientation and would violate our own law. So in that spirit, since I'm against all forms of discrimination, I'd say this should cover everyone. But then comes the question that I think Mr. Alex was alluding to. In many places that have some recognition of domestic partnership, there is, and not that I'm any expert on this, but this is what triggered in my mind. But when I'm looking at the Cook County documents, it defines a domestic partner, and I think we did this as well for our city policy, as people who share a common, two people who share a common household and are in a close and committed relationship of mutual financial and emotional support and intend to remain in the relationship. And I suppose that could be brought up to talk about something other than a romantic relationship. I remember reading, I don't know how long ago it was, I'm sure Michael knows, maybe 2 years ago when France passed their domestic partner law. It was, it included any two people who make a household together. And so this is what I read. I just read the story in the New York Times. They were talking about a priest and his homemaker could be domestic partners. The two sisters who are childless and without spouses who made a household together. So it was pretty broad. And in terms of, in my heart, I love the whole idea of it because people organize households to deal with various needs, and not everybody's household is based on a romantic or sexual relationship. And I don't know that we have to decide that. I guess it depends on the language used, but I'm just wondering what the desire is here. I could go either way. The intent, though, is, I think, of establishing this is to provide a mechanism for establishing domestic partnership for the purpose of dealing with zoning ordinance, health benefits, to provide employers, and I'm repeating what others have said, but any employer who wants to extend benefits to employees who are domestic partners would have a little bit easier time of it if there were a domestic partner registry in the community. So that's really where I'm thinking. And in that sense, I think the intent probably is more a couple in a romantic relationship. But that's just something to think about, that everywhere where they have this in the world, it is not limited to romantic partners.
Other comments, Mr. Alex, and then Mr. Hayes.
I'll make my comment now, and I think this is relevant to both the domestic partner registry issue and the issue of whether certain pieces of city legislation should accept domestic partnership as an equivalent to marriage. And I think I see that being the primary issue, and whether or not the domestic partner registry is effectively a means by which to allow the city to subsequently say that we're going to be able to have ordinances that deal with domestic partnership, because there's then a substantive way to quantify whether or not someone is in fact a domestic partner. I actually strongly disagree with Mr. Doyle's sentiment and cite the examples raised by Ms. Pat as examples of why. I think if you look at the context in which these ordinances were originally created, there were certain assumptions made about what constituted a household. And when those that wrote the legislation determined that there's an economic benefit or a public benefit to recognizing the value of individuals combining into households to own property or raise children or do business in the city and all the other things that our ordinances are intended to facilitate, really the only type of household that we had was opposite-sex couples, 2.3 kids, and typically single income, a single wage earner. And I think a lot of things have changed since these ordinances were created as a result of the population getting older, people waiting longer to marry, fewer people having children, people having fewer children, meaning fewer children to take care of people as they age, and the prevalence of, we're seeing an increase in non-traditional households. And I think to the extent that the city believes that it's beneficial for two people to own a piece of property together or obtain certain rights from the city by virtue of being a household, whether those individuals are of the same sex and married or of an opposite sex and involved in a personal relationship, whether they are, as I said before, a elderly person and their longtime caregiver, or as Ms. Pat raised, childless people who have banded together to form a household. I don't think it's, quite frankly, the province of the city to decide who should be able to be married or whether it's right or wrong that same-sex couples or opposite-sex couples live together. I think what it is the province of the city to do is to pass ordinances that attempt to provide property rights, economic benefits, and so forth to those people who we think are by receiving those benefits, are going to benefit the city. And in that regard, I would be opposed to something that would appear to be limited to romantic relationships, same-sex partners, opposite-sex partners, or whatever. I think if we're going to say this is not about marriage, this is about what Urbana is willing to consider a household for the purpose of its several ordinances, that the definition that Ms. Pat suggested and used in France, which is any two people, living together as a household over a period of time, seems like they ought to constitute a domestic partnership.
Committee members' comments, Ms. Wyman? Mr. Hayes, I'm sorry. Mr. Hayes,
No, I was just going to mention that in economic hard times like we have now, we have senior citizens who go on Social Security checks, and as they become older, their checks don't go as far as they used to. So they meet someone else who's willing to, share in all the expenses and the obligations. Now, many of them would like to get married, but the government penalizes them because when they look at the combined Social Security checks, if they get married, then the government is going to take some of the money back. So, in a way, this kind of ordinance would protect some of those people.
Ms. Wyman?
I just wanted to say that as we look towards giving staff direction at forming this registry, I think Mr. Alex's and Ms. Pat's comments about what would define a domestic partnership, I guess I don't have a problem with that. One thing we may want to keep in mind is again, looking to keep consistent the current bereavement or the benefits that we as a city give to our city employees who have domestic partnerships. And right now we've got a certain definition for eligibility as a domestic partnership. As we define domestic partnership for our registries, we may want to also then re-examine the definition we have for our city employees who are domestic partners. So just to keep that in mind, but I think the expansive view, I think, is, I don't see a problem with that, and I think that's a positive move. I appreciate those ideas, which I hadn't thought of when we originally talked about this. Thank you.
Let me put a motion on the table so we have something specific to discuss at this point. Conversation's been very helpful. The motion is a little different than what's written here, so I'll read the revised motion slowly. I move that we direct the city clerk to prepare a plan for a domestic partner registry for same-sex and opposite-sex cohabitating partners, and that we direct her to prepare this plan and to return the plan to council for review and approval. Second sentence is, there shall be no residency or citizenry requirement for registration. Third sentence reads as is, registered domestic partners shall at minimum receive 1, a certificate of domestic partnership, 2, wallet-sized versions of the above certificate, 3, an informational packet about what the status does not convey, resources for how to protect an unmarried relationship, and the places in the community that recognize domestic partnerships to the best of the city's knowledge. I want to add the last, which is that the domestic partnership shall be at least revenue neutral. So that is my motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I would like to speak to the motion just to clarify a few things and then take other discussion. The first is that this program would be a program of the city clerk's office, so it actually makes more sense that we direct the city clerk rather than staff. Certainly, I think that if need be, we can request information, legal information from staff, et cetera. And I would, be happy to work with the city clerk in trying to prepare something, and others, of course, can contribute. The second is that although it wasn't written this way, it was my intention originally that it be for same-sex and opposite-sex cohabitating partners. And I believe that there are just so many different kinds of relationships that aren't acknowledged. And in some ways, when it comes to same-sex partners, really full equality is what same-sex partners need and want. And anything less than that is a compromise. And I think that comes with the marriage equality on the federal level. In this case, I think we're talking about domestic partner registry for many purposes, some which we know of now, some which we don't know of. The one we know of now has to do with a few of our ordinances and codes, and others have to do with certainly recognition. And I didn't mention before, but although I've heard from the News Gazette editors that they may publish marriage announcements of same-sex partners who are married in Massachusetts and Canada, et cetera. They may. I haven't yet seen it personally. They do not have a history of that. And so actually, because that's kind of our record, our historical record in this community, dozens, hundreds, thousands, I don't know how many domestic partnerships, what should have been a civil marriage on many levels for same-sex couples is gone without being noted in a historic record. So as a result, we don't have that kind of benefit of hindsight to be able to look at names and numbers and understand relationships, because the historical record does not provide that to us. So this would provide some kind of public record. The residency or citizenry requirement, I see, because Urbana is really a municipality with a boundary around it, and there's so many people who go to the parks in Urbana or work in Urbana or like Urbana or visit Urbana or whatever it may be, it's very difficult to decide that this should, and because Champaign doesn't provide this registry currently, it may be useful to actually extend the registry outside of the boundaries of Urbana, because we are a metro center that's larger than just the municipal boundaries of the city. I added the citizenry requirement because although it should be obvious, I think there are a lot of people who think that they can only do legal things like registering things if they're actually citizens, and if there are immigrants from other countries who are in same-sex relationships and can't get married, this may be a way in which it should be explicit that they too can come and register with the city, although that doesn't change their immigration status. And I agree with revenue neutral. I don't think that we should be making a lot of money off of this. I also don't think that the city should be spending money on it at this point, and so I think it's reasonable to consider it to be a revenue neutral at the least. Ms. Wyman, you had comments, and then Ms. Papp.
So first is that I do think we should ask the staff to prepare it, just because I think it will need to be a collaborative effort. The clerk, obviously, as you stated, would be the one, I assume, who would administer a registry program, but certainly we'll need the city legal to look into the issues that I brought up before about whether we can have people who don't have a specific connection to Urbana or not one that's stated to be able to register with the program, and other issues like that. So, and the other thing is the clerk staff is pretty small, and if they've got other things they've got to be working on as well, I don't want this to have to stay on hold because the clerk's office is working on the things that they've got to work on, and they're a small staff. And if we can direct the staff to do that, I think that'd be Bruce Walden would work with legal and with the city clerk's office and with the other staff at the city to be able to make that happen, bringing in ideas or comments as he sees fit or necessary, and also obviously consulting with council. The citizenry requirement probably should just be a citizenship requirement, or lack. That is, there should be no citizenship requirement. And then, if we can just make clear in this motion, and I didn't write it all down, that it's that the definition of domestic partner for the registry program would be reflective of the comments that have been made tonight, and that is that it include couples that are same-sex or opposite sex, and that there is no requirement for the existence of a romantic relationship. And I think that's what Ms. Chenoweth said. I didn't get it all written down, so I wanted to clarify that indeed was the intent of the motion. Thank you.
Just to respond to your question, if I would, so the statement, the language in the county clerk's office at Cook County, which says you and your partner must be in a close and committed relationship of mutual financial and emotional support and intend to remain in such a relationship, that, are you requesting that kind of language not apply, or that it do apply?
Actually, I don't see a problem with that. I think that's fine. I think that we may need to clarify in the city of Urbana zone eligibility and restrictions that it not require a romantic relationship or a sexual relationship. Mr. Alex probably looks like he's got perhaps a better definition or idea.
Well, no, I would just say I think the Cook County definition is actually pretty good. I don't think that implies a romantic relationship. I mean, I think it implies emotional and financial support, which I think is probably to the extent that there is a public benefit to be derived from promoting the establishment of households. I would say that's what it is that one is trying to promote the establishment of.
Okay, Ms. Pat.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I don't, I was actually telling what language you said before changing it doesn't matter. I think when you say things like same-sex cohabitating couple, same-sex or opposite-sex cohabitating couple, that certainly suggests, if it doesn't clearly imply, that you're talking about people who are involved in a romantic and sexual relationship. And I also don't like the expression opposite sex, because men and women are not opposite sex. That's old language. They're two different sexes. But I think the Cook County language really gets at the public policy issue. And I don't mean to blah blah this later. I originally made clear I am for what France does, where I agree with what Mr. Dahl said earlier, is if the intent is just to deal with romantic relationships, then the law provides heterosexual couples with marriage and does not provide that to same-sex couples, and that's an inequity I think that should be corrected. But I think it's far better in terms of promoting the public interest. I mean, I just agree with Mr. Alex 100% for communities to support people making households together in ways that meet their economic and emotional needs and provide for their full participation and contribution to the community.
Okay, so there's a question on the table, which is it in the intent of the motion that it not be romantic, and the change of citizenship? And so I'd take those as friendly amendments, and I think we can determine the exact language of things because we have a time period by which it will come back to council. So as long as the motion can stand as is with the clarification that, kind of in addition, that it not be required that the people be in a romantic relationship, and we'll figure out the language from there. Ms. Pat?
I don't mean to be picky, but I would prefer that language about cohabitation really be taken out, because that's contrary to what we're saying is the intent. As your motion was reading, if it were, I move that we direct the city clerk and city staff to prepare a plan for domestic partnership registry for residents of, or did you want for residents of Urbana? Was that originally your motion? No. Domestic partner registry, period. There shall be no citizenship requirement for registration. Everything else you've got here, and then just say a domestic partner shall be, or domestic partners shall be persons in a close and committed relationship of mutual financial and emotional support who intend to remain in the relationship.
Okay. And
And that's the language of the, you know.
in addition, the revenue neutral.
Yeah, sure, all
So,
that.
okay, so
So
that.
basically take out the cohabitating part.
Okay, so I would take it as a friendly amendment and say that the current motion on the table, to summarize for folks before we move on with discussion, is what Ms. Pat has just enumerated, that it direct the city clerk and city staff, prepare a plan for domestic partner registry, period. There shall be no residency or citizenship requirement for registration, that the plan come back to council for review and approval, that registered domestic partners shall at minimum receive X, Y, and Z as listed here, and then a domestic partner is are people in a close committed relationship of mutual financial and emotional support, and they tend to remain in such a relationship, and that this program be at least revenue neutral. Mr. Hayes and then Mr.
And my
Roberts.
question is, what do you mean by revenue neutral?
What that would mean is that the city not expend additional funds outside of what is collected to maintain the program.
The negative way of paying it.
What's that?
We always have other fees for, certificates and licenses and things like that. So, I think we need to clarify that revenue neutral.
Ms. Wright?
If I can suggest, you just described it in the negative rather than the positive, that the fee would be charged to cover the cost of administrating the program. That's what the intent was.
Take that as another friendly amendment?
Sure. If you want to
Ms.
accept
Wyman,
it.
okay. A fee would be charged to cover the cost of the program. Mr. Roberts?
And that fee could be $25, which would be certainly not impossible to come up with, and it would probably cover the cost of making a fake, or not a fake, but I mean a small, pardon me. Thank you so much, Ruth. Making the smaller identification, which would be suitable for the registry. And may I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Okay. Okay, I haven't said that much about the issue. Why? Because we have 4 or 5 people here who are like wonderful proponents, well knowledgeable, who have worked on and thought about this issue for years. And I'm a resident who's come to council in the last month and a half. Of course, I have my opinions, and I have background and of experiences, and I have members of my family who, if they lived in this town, would be very, very pleased that such a progressive and useful concept of human life and quality of dignity of relationships, whether they be based upon the traditional love bonds of man and wife and the typical structure of society, or the ever-evolving relationships between individuals, which we have yet to understand completely. I think that this registry is a small step of showing an open-minded, progressive attitude that's been the hallmark of this town, unique, actually. When I first arrived in Urbana, you don't know what you're expecting. I looked around, I saw mainly like heavy white people eating at the diner or something, and I thought, well, there are no Hispanics, I don't see too many Negroes. I came from the Southwest, and we would have Native Americans, mixing with us freely. I thought, well, there's a little bit of white bread here. So, but, there are many ways for diversity to enter our society, and it doesn't always have to be racial or cultural. And it is important to have diversity of understanding among people and an openness of heart in dealing with all kinds of people who we don't know and they're not like us, but have as important needs and as sincere interests and purpose in their lives. And so, without going on, we have had covered the legalistic aspects of this registry, and I'm just saying that I support it on ethical and moral grounds. For the privilege of voting in a positive manner on this, I'm very happy, and we probably some members of my family who will look kindly upon me, and I think it's a wonderful step. And of course, being Urbana, it's unique and the people here are just like more creative and they're a step ahead. They're a step ahead of a lot of other places in town or in the state, perhaps. But a lot of times, what's happened here in this town, I've noticed, has become the norm eventually. So I think it's a great thing, and however you word it, it's going to be fine with me. The bigger, the better. the broader and the more inclusive, the more all the community will benefit and grow, and that's all I really need to say.
Mr. Whalen?
Mr. Roberts' comments show great generosity. The idea of diversity, strengthening our community, the idea of inclusiveness being one that we welcome in this community, this very generous community. He speaks very well and tenderly about our town, and it's welcome. There's not a negative thing that I can find with what you say, Mr. Roberts. I am a little concerned here that we're drafting this on the floor after there was such an outcry by some on the council for the lack of time that we spent on the adding 2 large council members at large. There was a big outcry by some saying, well, we didn't have enough time to discuss this. Well, tonight we're drafting this resolution without any serious consideration, considering all the possible outcomes which have been mentioned here broadly tonight. The economic outcomes, the effect on traditional marriages hasn't been really discussed very clearly, very well. This kind of thing, which has a major effect on society, a major effect on a very basic cell of society, the family, is something that should be given very long consideration, very wise consideration. It requires the depth of sullens that are pretty rare. I mean, it's not just a matter of shooting off your lip and saying, well, we think this is a good idea because of this and this and this. I mean, and just taking the obvious reasons. This requires a great deal of thought. I liked what Ms. Pat had to say about the various relationships. Not only does this include same-sex or heterosexual relationships that include romance, but it also includes sisters, and I think Mr. Alex mentioned war buddies. A large variety of people in our society that have, for one reason or another, bonded together and share a common goal. And in my estimation, I think that the outstanding thing about this city, which I think was being included in what Mr. Roberts had to say, is our concern about fairness and equality. As the French say, égalité. We believe, and we, for obvious good reason, in sharing in common goals and benefits. Men and women, gay and straight, handicapped and otherwise capable people, able-bodied people. We see that, and we see all of those minorities of different varieties, Asian, African American. This is the heart of this community, and it's one reason that I am so proud and pleased to have participated with this council in its efforts, because it is truly, I think, as a religious person or a person who believes in God, not necessarily religious, but I believe in God and I try to do the right thing, and I'm successful on occasion. This is the soul of our town, and this is exactly what I think God would want, that we share that common protection of each other. As a matter of fact, it's something that is inherent in our founding fathers' statements. It goes all the way back to our American Revolution. By comparison with the French Revolution and Robespierre's terrors and the dictatorship of Napoleon, we have in America this kind of common bond and common goal, noble as it is, and it is noble. It's as noble as our Star-Spangled Banner. But I can't agree with this at this point in time. I don't think enough thought has been given to it. I do think that we should find some way to bring about a better recognition of benefits to people who are not married, which are quite reasonable, that can be granted by will, or be granted by power of attorney, or by, like what Mr. Hayes brought up about Social Security. It's a major problem. I'm elderly, for Pete's sake. I hate to admit it, but I am. I got the proof right here. And I and my wife have discussed this a great deal because she's in a wheelchair and someday may need some special care. And they can come along and take all my money. And it's a real great problem. I don't know how we can resolve that. One of your Democrat ex-candidates for Congress who's an attorney, suggested to me, a lady, that I get a divorce. My wife get a divorce. I brought that up to my wife, and she had some serious doubts about the benefits. But in all, I'm trying to say something good here, but something cautious. One of the things I see as a problem is the dissolution of this kind of a relationship. In the Cook County ordinance, all you have to do is send in it's like one of those countries in the Middle East. You send in a postcard. It says this relationship is terminated. One person has to do it. And, boy, how's that for security? I wouldn't like that if I were related, if I was in that kind of relationship. I'd want something a little more binding. In any case, I do think that this should take some greater consideration. I don't know how we can do that. Your wish is to send it to staff, the clerk, city clerk, and Mr. Walden for some further drafting. I don't think we've considered it enough with all the possible outcomes. And as it is now, I cannot agree with it. I don't think that, first of all, I'm not sure that the city has the responsibility for this. And I don't know if we honestly were elected for this kind of purpose, to define this. And registries scare me. They scare me. Like in the 30s in Germany, registries were very common. I don't like that. And the disadvantages to people who may be gay, for example, don't want that to be known, or don't want to publicize it. There it is in it's public information. So, or people who are living in a heterosexual relationship may not want that either. So at this point in time, I can't go along with this. I'm sorry. I do appreciate your best efforts and your heart.
Thank you, Mr. Whalen. Ms. Pat, and then Mr. Alex.
Just quickly, just want to point out for anyone who's following, there is more time to discuss, there'll be more time to consider this and to discuss this, because we're not sending this to City Council with a recommendation for approval next week. The purpose of this motion tonight is to request the staff to draft something, and then that would come back to committee, and then we'll have consideration and discussion all over again. And the other thing is the point Mr. Whalen raised. This is not a mandatory registration. people who do not want to be on record anywhere as being in a domestic partnership or gay or anything where people might think that they're lesbian or gay just don't have to register. This is the registry is for the people who want to register and is not in any way mandatory. Kind of like on applications when they ask, like say, to admission to school, when they ask for ethnic and racial background so that they can keep track of their admissions as far as the balance for diversity. It's optional. A person doesn't have to put that down if a person doesn't want their religion or their race or their ethnicity recorded anywhere. They just skip it.
Okay, Mr. Alex?
I would just like to say I agree with Mr. Whalen's concerns about drafting legislation on the floor and on the fly, and I would hope that if this does pass tonight, that this is something that is, diligently looked at by staff and by those members of the council who are sponsoring it, and that this is the kind of thing that we will have ample opportunity for discussion for at the committee level before anything comes to council.
Just a few final comments. One is certainly I agree with other council members in that there's not a desire to rush this through or turn this into law next week. That while this issue I think has been brewing for quite some time, based on the type of constituent contact I've had and I know other council members have had, I think it's also an issue that came up and that we realized was coming after we started working on bereavement and family medical leave benefits for city employees. I think it was just a matter of time before we took the next step, which is a domestic partner registry program that we're looking at tonight, and we'll look at, I'm sure, over the next several weeks, probably a couple of months, as staff works on this registry program, brings back ideas or bounces back ideas to us, and we continue to look at it at committee meetings until it's ready for final approval, again, perhaps a couple months down the road. Mr. Whalen brought up the issue of economic impact, and I think if the idea is the impact on the city, again, the goal is to make this a revenue-neutral program. We certainly don't want to I think there's not an intent or a desire to make money off of this, but simply to keep this revenue neutral. And while there's been some references to the effect on marriage, and I think Mr. Whalen made that reference, obviously the city, under its home rule authority, does not have the right to create marriage or to dissolve marriages. This simply provides, one, a way for the city to be able to acknowledge the domestic partnerships or the different kinds of families that make up our community, as well as be able to bring our ordinances and our codes, like our zoning ordinance, into compliance. And as Ms. Chenoweth pointed out, it's a way for couples who wish to, or for domestic partnerships who wish to, document their relationship in some way that otherwise really goes without notice or without historical documentation, and a way for society to be able to acknowledge the relationships that partnerships wish to have acknowledged that, again, are not otherwise acknowledged. The concern about dissolution and in Cook County, how you could just send in a form to dissolve your domestic partnership, I would remind council members that to dissolve a marriage is actually just about as easy. You've got at the courthouse, there's a form you fill out that you turn in to dissolve your relationship. You can also file a verified, and in addition, file a verified petition for dissolution of marriage, and then you go through the courts, and you're dissolved. And you also don't have to wait 30 days, which I think a lot of cities require and domestic partnerships require in order to start a new domestic partnership. When you're in a marriage relationship, you can get married the next day after you're divorced. So that's all I have on that issue. Thank you.
Any other comments? If not, all those in favor, please signify by saying.
Roll call on this, please.
Certainly. If we could have a roll call, Ms. Clark. All those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. There'd be a roll call. It's getting late. We're fading fast here. You have to.
Mr. Alex?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
No.
Ms. Wyman?
Yes.
It passes with 6 ayes. And next we have a discussion on zoning ordinance and other changes necessary to address domestic partnerships, unrecognized marriages, and foster child and other dependents and dwelling unit definitions. And just before we go on, we are probably going to hit the 11 o'clock mark and have to extend. I do want to ask people to try to be as brief and as efficient with your comments as possible throughout these last 3 agenda items. Ms. Pack.
I move to direct the city staff to initiate a plan case to make the following changes in the Urbana zoning ordinance. This was on everyone's desk. 1, that all references defining a family or applying the definition of family should treat foster children in the same manner as children who are born or adopted into a family. And 2, all references to persons related by blood or marriage should be changed to say blood or marriage or domestic partnership registered with the city.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Is there a discussion? Mr. Allen.
I would like to ask that we use the language, or consider using the language that I believe is from the zoning ordinance that talks about children in custody and loco parentis and so forth, in lieu of the words foster children, to cover temporary custody and other situations, which I think that existing language covered well, but I was going through the zoning ordinance tonight and couldn't find.
That was the language that was in the section that we had last.
Yeah, it was in the definition of. I thought it was in the definition of duplex in the zoning ordinance,
Yes.
but I couldn't find it.
I would accept that as a friendly amendment, and what that would say is, I'll find it in a minute, I'm sorry, I brought it with me. Oh, here we go. Ordinarily, in the local parentis relationship, one or more members of the basic group, such as foster children, that was the language I had here. So you'd want to say, all references defining family, applying that should treat foster children or any children in a local parentis relationship.
That's fine.
Okay, we have clarified motion. Who's the seconder of the motion? I was. And you accept that amendment then? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on this item? No. If not, all those in favor?
Can we have a roll call on this, too, please?
Yes, we could have a roll call. We could have a roll call. Ms. Clark?
Okay. Mr. Alex?
Yes.
Ms. Chenoweth?
Yes.
Mr. Hayes? Ms. Pat?
Yes.
Mr. Roberts?
Yes.
Mr. Whalen?
No?
Ms. Wyman?
Yes. That carries 6-1. Next, we have ordinance number 2004-01-015, an ordinance approving the Philo Road Business District Revitalization Action Plan. And we'll be hearing from Mr. Ridgetts.
Let me just kick this off. A couple opening remarks. We've been working pretty hard in the last several months on trying to, last 6 months or so, on trying to come up with a plan and action plan for redevelopment of Philo Road area. It's been a top priority for us. We have spent hundreds and hundreds of staff time hours on approaching this issue. We have spent a considerable amount of resources on trying to address this issue, along with all the other projects we're doing downtown and other locations. I'd like to thank John. John's been the lead on this, but certainly Libby and Rob and Kathy Larson and others have contributed. I want to keep in mind that over 400 Urbana residents participated in this as well by returning their surveys. We also had a number of developers that participated in some of the conclusions and recommendations in the report by providing us their input. I think we have a general framework to go forward with. We've discussed this with a number of you. We have an action plan. Some of the plans of some of the action steps have been put in place. The area is far from being a ghost town or dead. There's a lot of economic activity. There's a lot of development. We have specific issues with regard to the big boxes, and I think we have a plan, and I feel pretty good about it, and I think it's been worthwhile to spend this time. As you read in the paper last week, hopefully the first step of that will take place with the Jewel redevelopment, but this will give us a framework for what we're looking at, which is generally to look at employment centers for the uses of the big box with outlots in front that provide a more vibrant Philo corridor, and then also the reuse of those buildings. So the report that you'll receive provides a framework for that. And again, I just want to say thanks to all the staff that put in hundreds of hours on this. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Tonight, staff would like to present the Philo Road Business District Revitalization Action Plan for approval as the city's redevelopment plan for this area. It would be the guiding document for zoning, marketing efforts, infrastructure investments, and other development policies in the business district. Also tonight, we'll present some of the results of the market studies in the southeastern Urbana area and present some of the efforts to date. The goal of the Philo Road Revitalization Action Plan is to revitalize the business district as a community and neighborhood retail service and entertainment center, and address issues that have been brought up by the council, the businesses in the area, and the public, and again to provide guidance for development in the area. The area is generally inscribed by Florida Avenue to the north and Mumford Drive to the south, Cottage Grove to the west, and Sunnycrest Apartments 1 and 2 to the east. And the retail, the land uses in the area are varied, and in the retail area, the uses include necessity, niche, and convenience retail operations. Entertainment uses include fast and casual dining and recreation uses. The office uses include professional and personal services featuring the fire insurance and retail sector, also health and child care and personal grooming. Housing in the area includes a full spectrum of apartments, townhomes, duplexes, and single-family housing. And you can see from this slide the great variety of different uses that occur in the business district. The market trends in the area start with the Sunnycrest Philo area being a formal regional retail center. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, this was the case, and in the early 90s, development on North Market and Neal Streets occurred, and cut into the markets for this area for mass merchandising. Trends continued into the 90s towards larger and larger mass merchandising formats, to the point where mega center development occurred, which required freeway access to service the volume deep discounting that was occurring in those areas. And that's exemplified by Menards, Best Buy, and Walmart, who had really good locations to begin with, but who had changed locations in North Champaign, essentially to meet these larger formats and greater access requirements. Those retailers that didn't meet the competition, didn't respond to their environment, such as Kmart, have receded in their operations and indeed no longer have a presence in Champaign-Urbana. And also the relocation of Illinois Route 130 from Philo Road to High Cross Road changed retail traffic patterns as well. And the result is a graph that you've seen before. The steep inclines representing increases in traffic flows, of course, belong to Market and Neal Streets. And those curves, or those graphs that you see that level off or slightly increase, belong to the Philo Road area, which is some good news in actuality, because you would have expected those rates of traffic, those average daily traffic counts, to decrease. We feel that because of the increase in population and housing in the area, that they have stabilized. There's also some good news in the development trends in general in the area. The population from 1990 to 2003 in a 1 mile radius from the Kmart building actually increased by 6.1%. The current household income stands at $39,400. Also, in the 1990 to 2003 time period, we saw a household increase of 10.59%. Now, keep in mind, this only included a couple years of the Build-Urbana tax rebate program, which helps spur housing development in southeast Urbana. But we have about a dozen housing developments that are currently in play, as exemplified by this housing activities and projections map. These projects are all currently under construction and due to be finished within the next 10 to 20 years. Also in this area, in the blue, we look at future housing development areas. All this activity requires infrastructure, and we're fortunate that the planning and execution of infrastructure improvements have already started to take place. Colorado Avenue has begun its extension to the Stone Creek Boulevard in 2004 and 2005. Fowler Road reconstruction has been budgeted and has received funding, or at least a promise of funding in the form of grants for 2006, and that includes improvement reconstruction to 3 lanes with curb and gutter and a signalized intersection at Colorado Avenue and Philo. And the planning and anticipated budgeting for Florida Avenue extending to High Cross Road with the anticipation of developments in that area has actually begun. And of course there are walking and biking trails that are planned with these projects, and that's exemplified by this 10-year street resurfacing plan map. In the green we see reconstruction projects, in the blue we see construction projects. The purple dotted lines are bicycle path extensions. Assistance programs exist already and have been improved in the Philo Road area. The council approved an improvement or expansion, more flexibility in the Philo Road Business District Redevelopment Incentive Program to better serve the area and to help to improve businesses in the area and to instill some new outlot development, as well as fill vacant spaces. Development agreements are also available in this area, and those are for projects that are a little more substantial, and we are encouraging our developers to look at substantial projects and try to come to some kind of a term or agreement with us that we can support those projects. The Regional Planning Commission and Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Development have finance programs that fill finance gaps as well as provide incentives for projects looking in the whole community as well as the Philo Road Business District. We also will examine the potential for tax increment financing in the area. Our market research is mainly comprised of surveys that have been done in the Philo Road Business District. Previous surveys indicate that the citizenry throughout Urbana want to see new business brought into the area and redevelopment to occur. It also shows a very optimistic business population, or a collection of business people in the Philo Road Business District that feel they will be expanding in the near future. Our resident shopper survey had over 540 responses, and demonstrated that that this area has a community-wide market that is very loyal to this area and wants to see the convenience of this shopping area as well as the selection of the goods and services that are there kept in place, but who also want to see more retail and more restaurants and better appearances and security in the area. And our developer survey, as well as our business survey, showed that these groups both felt that there was more potential for redevelopment of the area, as well as reuse of buildings and development of outlots, as well as the location of new businesses. But these things need to be supported by wider roads connecting to High Cross and Windsor Avenues, and also better building maintenance and management, and also improved incentives in the area to make these kinds of improvements happen. And Southeast Business Group has been a supporter and a participant in this process, and indeed has helped convey some of this information to us as well, and helped us with recognizing there needs to be a theme in marketing and development according to that theme in the area. There are numerous relevant policies in the 1982 and in the 2005 plan, comprehensive plan and plan amendment that I have summarized here that include the pursuit of infill opportunities that create a compact community, and also that maximize our land and infrastructure uses, that seeks to retain and expand our business base, as well as create commercial areas that have compatible needs with the business bases and have or that address new needed uses. Also, we of course want to produce net revenues for the city when we do redevelopment projects, and also we want to arrest the spread of blight and improve appearance in our commercial areas. And so this brings us to our action plan. And of course, the first item on your action plan, the beginning of it is listed on page 23 of the handouts you've received. You can follow along for some of the details there. But in improving the image of the Philo Road Business District, we want to identify that theme that the Southeast Urbana Business Group suggested that we do. We want to improve. We want to place improved directional signs on Windsor and Philo to remind people that the business district is indeed there to service them. And also we want to install improved welcome banners and welcome signs in the area to create a more welcoming atmosphere in the business district. We of course want to plan and construct our infrastructure improvements, finish Philo Road and the Colorado Avenue extensions and bike trail extensions, and we want to beautify the Philo Road Business District as well. And that includes some of the research that staff has been doing to look for scenarios that we can apply to beautifying the business district. And you can see one right here. This is the Kmart parking lot, and the top picture is as it stands right now. The lower picture is as it would be if we applied some beautification techniques to it, putting in some medians and some landscaping to create a more inviting scenario for redevelopment as well as for shopping. We also want to look at streetscaping in the area, landscaping sidewalks and streets, landscaping the median strips like you've seen in parking lots, but also possibly up and down Philo Road itself, and provide some landscaping incentives if we need to for the private properties that we'd like to see improved. Also, we'd like to see improved building appearances, and so we can use some of our incentive programs to help update facades and signage. And also we'd like to see improvement in the upkeep and maintenance of the properties in the area, collect the carts, keep the refuse picked up in the shopping areas and the vacant lots in the area, as well as keeping the vacant buildings neat and clean. And we'd like to work with the Southeast Urbana Business Group to try and implement these types of practices. The action plan also calls for us to provide marketing assistance. We routinely refer buildings now to businesses that are looking for space, but we'll collaborate more closely with the business owners and real estate agents to get information and to assist them in marketing the buildings with the materials and information that we have. And we'll also assist in general with marketing the Philo Road Business District, and you've seen the materials already with the directory and the web links and our incentives information. And we'll provide technical and public relations assistance and marketing assistance to individual businesses that want to increase their customer base through marketing. We need to investigate building reuses, and of course that involves closer collaboration with the building owners, as well as with developers who have new ideas for business uses in those buildings and reuses. And also we want to investigate alternative uses for outlots and development opportunities thereof. We have an example of that here, where we can provide a little guidance and suggest some outlot development on an existing lot that already has some existing buildings, some of which could be utilized more, but moreover we have the opportunity to improve not only the tax base but also the appearance of the area and the viability of the business district in general by these outlot developments. And also we want to improve our signage and our zoning. And we want to take a look at zoning and see where we can improve that and make development in the area more readily accomplished, and look at signage improvements that can be accomplished in the area, and encourage our businesses to create those signage and construct those signage improvements and create a better visual atmosphere in the business district itself. And I've gone through this pretty quick in order to keep my comments brief, but we feel that, staff feels that with the implementation of the Philo Road action plan, that we can indeed recreate this area as a community, whole community, as well as a neighborhood business district, and we recommend its approval.
The chair would entertain a motion to extend the meeting.
I move we extend the meeting 15 minutes.
We have a motion and a second for 15 minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, we'll go for 15 more minutes. At this point, we'll take questions to staff. Charles?
I'd like to address a couple issues, this being primarily in my ward and something I've been following for a long time, even before I was on the council, as a result of my service with the Plan Commission and living in the area. I read through the action plan, and I think it's actually a very good plan. I was pleased to see. I was concerned after the report on economic conditions, which seemed a bit rosier than maybe it was useful in terms of discussing the overall occupancy of the structures, that I think this is very pragmatic and really looks at what some of the real problems are there. I did have number of concerns. One was in, and I'm not quite sure where I would fit this into the action plan. This might go to section 1, which was the improving the image of the area. But I'm thinking more in terms of safety and perception rather than aesthetics. I think we have a law enforcement problem in this area. There have been recently an increase in the level of crime in this area, and obviously people have speculated as to what the cause of that is, whether it's the density of apartments in that area, whether it's the physical layout. But I think clearly a contributing factor is the number of vacant buildings, large parking lots with areas behind these buildings which tend to become places to loiter, places to gather, large parking lots which people have to walk across. I believe there was a case of a robbery there just in this last week. And I think that in order to provide an area in which people are going to be interested in shopping or visiting or patronizing, creating an area that people are interested in investing in as business people, one of the primary concerns we need to have there is demonstrating that the area is safe. And I think there are two ways we can approach that. One is increased police presence to attempt to address some of the nuisance crimes and violent crimes that we're seeing in that area. And another issue is aggressive enforcement of codes and existing ordinances as regards the maintenance of these vacant buildings, cleanup of trash, maintenance of building exteriors, pavement. We see illegal dumping behind these structures somehow and sometimes. And I think, as a city, we need to, at the same time as we are assisting the owners of these vacant properties in marketing them and demonstrating to them that we are there to help them reuse these, we also have to continue to take a hard line with them in terms of making sure they keep these properties clean, they keep these properties safe, and they keep these properties monitored and policed to prevent them from becoming a focus for crime and for nuisance activity in the neighborhood. So I think that is something that's probably worthy of mention. I've gotten a number of citizen comments on it, asking, what are we going to do about crime in this area? What are we going to do to make this place safe, to clean this area up? And I think that's something that's probably worthy of inclusion in an action plan for that area, is increasing law enforcement presence and increasing city enforcement of codes with regard to the maintenance of these vacant buildings. The second issue that comes to mind is I agree wholeheartedly with the goal of increasing the street connectivity. clearly extending Florida Avenue to High Cross Road is something that I know we have as a priority, and we'll do as soon as we can find a developer interested in that area along that road from Savannah Green east. That's something I think would really help increase the visibility and the accessibility of this area as we look to redevelop it for whatever uses we end up redeveloping it for. Likewise with the Colorado Avenue extension, I think now we have this area that's at the eastern sort of dead end of Colorado, that's this dead end street where not many people go, and we have this park back there which with the development of the Prairie Winds project we're looking at providing some more access to. And I think it's essential that Colorado extension happen all the way to Stone Creek Boulevard. Don't tell Paul Tatman, but I was trespassing out there the other day to see how things were going, and I noticed that the construction of that pavement has stopped about 100 feet west of Stone Creek, and I know we had this issue at Plan Commission, and maybe Dr. Tyler can tell us what the status of working with the Stone Creek developers to complete that pavement will be.
No recent news. We think
Okay.
it should be connected.
Okay, I think it's in the best interests of all involved that the city bring all applicable pressure to bear on the relevant parties to get that completed. Ending up with a street that ends 100 feet west of Stone Creek Boulevard in dirt ruts is probably not what we need to do to increase the traffic counts and to increase the image of the Fowler Road Business District. I think I like the emphasis in the action plan on cosmetic improvements to some of the structures. I think, if you look at Sunnycrest Mall, this is something that looks pretty dated. I think some of the landscaping and some of the improvements that have been discussed to the area will improve the image of lot. I think if there is ever a situation for which the TIF ordinance was created, this is it. And I would certainly support the recommendation in the final report that we look at the possibility of TIF designation for this area. And finally, I would encourage that one of the things we may want to do with TIF money or otherwise is to try to get creative with the owners of some of the larger vacant properties to promote the notion that perhaps the only way to have these properties realize their highest and best use is redevelopment of the site. And I know this is something that the city has shied away from in the past because the developers, typically, the owner of a, for example, a Kmart, Jerry's IGA, they have money sunk in the building. They probably don't have the resources to, undertake a full-scale planned unit development and so forth to really get to the highest and best use of the land. But at the same time, I think we've all seen what happens to these big box or not so big box stores, right? They start out as a premium retail use or a grocery use, then they become a big lots, then they become a flea market, and then they become, 2 days a month a book sale or liquidation sale or something. And it's just the nature of these buildings that they become obsolete. And I think we need to convey to the owners of these buildings that not only are we interested in helping them market these buildings as is in the event that they can find a tenant, assuming it's a quality tenant that's actually going to realize sales tax revenue for the city, but in the event that that doesn't seem likely, I think we need to be creative as a city in terms of working with them and seeing how we can apply revenue such as or resources such as TIF dollars to encourage the redevelopment of these structures. I think I was very pleased to see it. I think there's a lot of good suggestions in here, and I'm wholeheartedly in support of it.
Thank you.
Any other comments at this point? Allen.
Thank you. Really appreciate what you're saying about Chris, about the development here and the need for better security because of the increase in crime and the various areas that lend themselves to some kind of secret activity behind the buildings. I've been working on this myself for some time. I talked with some bowling alley people, bowlers or bowling companies about putting a bowling alley in the Kmart building, and met with some success, but nothing concrete yet. I've talked with Dr. Libby about this, the signage, and I'm so pleased. I must say, this analysis in detail is exactly what we've needed for so long, and it really is. As I say, I've spoken with Dr. Tyler about this, about the signage problems. Really, sort of a modeled mixed bag of signs out there that give people a confused notation or confused notion of what that's all about out there. And, one of the problems we have is the ownership of those individual buildings and companies. The Oscos, we had Dr. Tyler and I worked on Oscos there to get them to put a better sign in, and they were all willing to do it, and the city attorney, their attorney came down, and all of a sudden the corporation squelched the deal. Talked to the IGA people about extending their lease and trying to get an extended lease and staying there, and they were working on it quite consistently, but it fell through. All of these, and then of course Sunnycrest Mall, as you say, Chris, it is dated, and it's, if you recall, they had a McDonald's, and right across the street there, right across the drive, they had a Burger King. Really poor marketing, and of course the owner of the property, he just needed to rent the land, and so he rented it to whoever came along, and without regard for any planning, didn't work with the city, didn't communicate with the city about planning, and so this is what we need. That's a hodgepodge of uses that are very confusing. There's no unity to this thing. There's no message like we've heard Joe Petrie tonight talk about downtown at 5 Points. This it's a real poor development, and I know that Dr. Tyler has been working on this for some time, and this outcome, this book, the ideas that this represents are just magnificent, and that's what we need. And we need to move forward with this, and if necessary, with the TIF district, with the aid of a TIF district, perhaps knocking down some of these buildings, clearing the land, so that somebody with an imagination come along and say, hey, there's a possibility. So I'm very pleased with your work, and I look forward to working with you as long as I can, if not on the council, perhaps in some future capacity.
Thank you.
Motion or discussion? Ms. Pat?
I just have one question. I'm sorry, it's late, but I was thinking about this when I read the document over the weekend. How is this different from what we voted on in November? I thought we already passed an action plan.
It's really similar.
No, you voted, the only action that's been taken regarding this area is just to revise the guidelines for the Fowler Road business.
That was what we voted on, okay. And then we had the presentation on the study.
Right, yeah.
Which is part of what this report is, which is why it looks so familiar.
Yeah, we just gave reports, and that's been incorporated into this.
Thank you.
Any other? We actually don't have a motion on the table, so I entertain a motion. Ms. Wyman?
I move we send ordinance number 2004-01-015, an ordinance approving the Fowler Road Business District Revitalization Action Plan to council with a recommendation for approval.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Not all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That carries to council.